Hello, welcome to another pilot. I promise no more pilots now. If you're in America, happy presidential inauguration day. It's your 60th, your 47th president. It's a big day for you, and I appreciate that coming from the other side of the pond in Britain. So, whatever side of the politics you are, we want to be moderate on this channel. We want to be authentic, and we want to be honest. There's lots to talk about. We want in the spin sphere to decode and unravel the rhetoric of all sides. We want all views on as well, and we'll also look out for people in the threads to bring out their points to share with the panel. So we're going to look tonight at America. Of course we would, because of what's happening at the moment. A change of president is always important to the West. So Trump 2, as I call it, his impact on the USA and his impact on the world, and the ramifications for us in Britain, in Canada, everywhere else. It should be a damn good chat. So wherever you are in the world, I'm sure you've seen the coverage. It's quite exciting, whichever side you're on. So time to get our friends on. So let's go. I mean, this is about America, so I might as well get my friend on. Cliff, good to see you. You're representing the whole of America tonight. There you go.
That would make every single friend I have laugh out loud. I don't see myself as a representative of America, but that's kind of the way America works.
This is it, and
we're
it's
all individuals.
And this is also just like lads in a pub talking about politics, as simple as that. We should have 4 of us on. Our Canadian friend is just trying to get on, but I'll get Jeremy on now, also from Britain. So good to see you, Jeremy.
Hi, howdy. Right.
It's an exciting day, and I'm going to get on with it now because everybody has just seen the inauguration. And of course, every country really wants to know how it affects them. Should they copy or emulate America or not? So we need to get on with it, I suppose. So first of all, here we go. Well, the Time magazine has suddenly changed things around. The winds have changed. They seem to be kind of indicating there, and they show you kind of, Biden's been. I was quite shocked that actually they do spend in 6 or 7 hours. They completely change the Oval Office, don't they? They totally redecorate. Anyway, so here's the new crowds. Trump is back, the 45th and 47th president. Barron is now massive, and the first lady is now back to being Melania Trump. It's been quite exciting to watch. I mean, just to see President Biden doing the YMCA with the village people who apparently voted for Kamala, but good for them. They've turned up. He did use their song all the way through. And of course, peaceful transition is important in democracies, and it did happen today. And there you've got the 2 first families of the last so many years, really. And you could argue style looks as though it's back. I mean, gosh, Melania Trump did look pretty impressive today in that outfit. And J.D. Vance seems promising as well from when I heard him in the vice presidential debate when I was over there. There's the new cabinet, all looking slick. So it's what I'm saying is it's all change. And there, a couple of hours ago, there we were. The Republicans seem to be sat on one side, the Democrats almost on the other. Most of the presidents standing up, sitting down. It was fascinating to watch. So what were your thoughts, Cliff? You watched your own, your democracy in action. What any takes from today that when you watched it, just out of observation first before we get into it?
I mean, it's ceremony. He was very even toned. I didn't think there was anything surprising in what he said. He's said most of the speech is what he's been touting all along. I probably am in the majority group in America that voted for Donald Trump because we are painted into a corner. I don't particularly like everything that he represents and all the ideas he has, but we didn't have a lot of other options. And by the actions of the Democratic Party, forcing Biden to step aside, forcing Kamala into the election without primary elections. I don't know. Did y'all do primary elections over there for for Parliament and
No.
it's basically it's a process where the political party asks voter constituencies in the states, and that they're then confirmed by an electoral process in states to get enough points. Each state has a number of points based on its population.
College,
and so that ideally is to even everything out. Well, if you skip that whole process, you're taking, public view out of the election process. There was a whole lot of shenanigans going on. So there wasn't a lot that I felt. I mean, he loses me when he's talking about taking back the Panama Canal.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that because just so everybody understands tonight, I've split the debate and the discussion into Trump's domestic agenda, his global agenda, and the cultural agenda. So there's quite a lot of tasty things for us to discuss. Those are the results that have got us into this position. Electoral college-wise, you've got 226 for Harris, 312 for Trump. You can see red dominates, although some of the bigger states were the blue ones. And so that's why it's always sometimes a bit dicey. But there you go. Those are the results. And that's why we had what we had today. What I just wanted to show you is it's quite interesting, isn't it? That he's got the trifecta. He's got Congress. The Republicans are in an interesting position for the next 2 years to probably enact what they want to enact. It's tight in some places, but there's a possibility there. And regarding, I don't know about the rest of the world, but in America, the YouGov did a sample here, optimism about the next 4 years with Trump as president. And you can see there the youngsters, 18 to 29-year-olds, 67%. And it actually goes down as you get older, which actually surprised me a little bit, just the way things are reported. In a way, Jeremy, I wonder if that kind of reflects a bit of the kind of reform element in Britain.
I think so, definitely. And people want to have something different rather than either swinging from Conservatives to Labour, vice versa. As to whether reform will make it fully as an elected party on its own, that is debatable. They might need the help of the Conservatives to get in, but I don't think that Labour will get back in. In fact, it might be a very early general election.
Yeah, I mean, I can only represent what I hear in Britain. I can't represent Britain, but I can say what I hear. And if I had my Aussies on and Brian, our Canadian friend, he can actually represent where they all stand. But regarding Britain, there is some kind of, on some quarters, there's envy that, you've made a big decision in America and you're going down a certain path, whereas we have made recently a decision and we're in the opposite direction. So there's a bit of a kind of conflict going on, and those who obviously are slightly on the right of things are jealous and are wishing we could do a Trump effect, but that's not going to happen. Not for the next 4 years or so. So it's going to be interesting, very interesting for different countries, and obviously for America, where obviously the most impact's going to come from. I want to ask what first of all, everybody in the thread, welcome to you all. It looks busy already. And I was wanting to get the panel's thoughts before we go into all his policies and tasty bits of where we might go. What's this concept of the presidential pardon? Because today, and I know it's not the first time, but it's just fascinating how an outgoing president just pardons. Well, look at that. James Biden, Sarah Biden, John Owens, Francis Biden, Dr. Fauci. I mean, and there's just a few, but to be on the day you leave, if you are saying you're a clean pair of hands, to suddenly be pardoning half your family is a bit of an interesting one. How did you take that, Cliff?
It was not surprising, but very disconcerting because it sets a further precedent. Now, the origins, I would have to look up the actual origins of the amendment with presidential power to give pardons. But the first time was during our Civil War, where it really got enacted, right? We had an internal war, North versus South, Americans fighting Americans. At the end of that, we had a whole bunch of Americans that had to be reintegrated. And so a great deal of, there were pardons given to generals and other people to say, look, we just want this to be over. We want to move on. We want to unite America again and not have this conflict. Things got a little crazy some years later when Richard Nixon participated in Watergate,
Yeah.
and was impeached. That's a whole other process where they decide the president is no longer fit for governing, and President Ford coming in gave him pardons for anything related to Watergate.
What is it?
And potential crimes related to it. It's a way of saying there were criminalities, there were things that greatly affect the country that you did wrong, but it's okay. We're not going to let you suffer any more than what you suffered. But there's been no crimes here, have there? Or did they commit crimes that we don't know about?
I mean, if you accept a pardon as part of Biden's family, is it he's just protecting you? Because the way America seems to have gone, sadly, in the last few years is lawfare. And, it has descended, I think, in the last few decades, where basically whoever's not in power, that they've tried to impeach how many presidents. It's become a bit silly, really. It seems to me from the outside that it just seems to be a bit of tit for tat,
It is, I believe, too, because there's such a pushback. We're in two very extreme sides of the right left component to politics right now, and I would even contend that Republican support he's got in Congress is not entirely true Republican right wing. If you get me, there's some people who are very, very opposed to Trump, but they still have Republican at the end of their name.
Yeah.
And so I think there's this really, really strange shifting going on in the parties. We may even, knock on wood, it wouldn't hurt us to have a third or a fourth or some other options. Where right now this binary is, got people in a position.
And yet we've widened. I mean, we seem to have been to a third party at the moment. Well, third or fourth party in Britain. It seems to have widened. It used to feel a bit binary. So it's interesting how America's gone that way. You see, I would have thought, Jeremy, our system, we obviously can't do pardons, but what does happen in the gift of the prime ministers, who obviously aren't commanders in chief, is you get sent to the House of Lords.
Yes.
So presidents seem to kind of help their friends with pardons and various things, whereas in Britain, the prime minister in New Year's honours, birthday honours, it seems, resignation honours, puts their friends in the House of Lords, don't they?
That's right. They either get a damehood or a sir or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, this sort of pardoning is really kind of covering your tracks, isn't it? So it's allowing to cover your tracks. You see.
Well,
so
this action of it seems to be, to me personally, because it's not. In other words, the wording of the pardon power relates to giving someone legal pardon for crimes against the state. So if you've done something really wrong, then the president can decide, you've been removed from office, or you've had this stigma with you for the rest of your life or whatever, but I will pardon you for it. But this isn't as far. He's gone pretty far with these pardons. There's never been this many pardons issued.
It doesn't really send out very good signals regarding American politics. That,
not to me.
Because people just say, well, the next president could do the same thing, and his friends could do the same thing, etc., etc.
We have another issue with what they call an executive order.
The
president as commander in chief or head of the executive branch.
Those have increased in number, haven't they? I've studied American politics all the way back to the 1970s, and yes, the executive orders was more of a rarity. It was obviously people were sniffy about executive orders because, to be quite honest, you wanted to be a republic. You didn't want a monarchy. And obviously, the more executive orders you do, that's like monarchy by decree. And that's, you're bypassing Congress, aren't you? That's
it's meant to be a way to tweak existing law. So if there's some funny wording or whatever, you want to have a little bit more of a push, strict or leniency, whichever way it is. But now it's just become
Yeah,
a
but
series of executive orders from the last.
I think the number of executive orders is partly testament to your Congress has not been working well together, and the more Congress has had a stalemate, the more they resort to executive order. The trouble is that America was set up not to act like a monarchy, and that's an interesting tester. Now, the photograph here, I just wanted to show you before we get moving on. We've mentioned the pardons, and obviously that's a key moment today for a lot of discussion. But the other thing is, I found it fascinating because obviously the weather and they had to do the inauguration in the rotunda. I was fascinated when President Trump did his speech and Biden, Kamala Harris, the Clintons, George Bush, Obama, they all sat there, grim. And it was interesting because everyone was standing up. I suppose there were lots of his supporters were in there. People were cheering a lot of his statements and his points about what he was going to do. A lot of them were executive orders. And then you saw the Democrat base sat. And it's not a good look, is it? Because there's no kind of mutual respect anymore, it looks like to me. And so it just seemed a bad look. And you could see how the Democrats, who obviously their message didn't win, and they're sat there about to hear this this revolution of policies.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and it's true. It's become that bifurcated, and it's not even a question of, I would refer to myself as more of a constitutionalist libertarian. I know that we have our Constitution and go by those rules, be very strict about it, but also maximize the amount of liberty people can enjoy and have that they're granted to them by their creator, in whatever way you want to word that. But right now, even this kind of disdain from one side or the other this acknowledges the fact that we are still all one nation. We're all supposed to be operating under the same precepts, and it's become very much my way or the highway on both sides. Which I thought that was another take I had from Trump's speech, and I may be a little bit pro-Trump on that. Is it didn't sound like I'm going to do my thing and you're not allowed to disagree.
Yeah,
as
I said, there was no kind of thank you for your 4 years service and all the rest of it, and that's where it kind of does deep out. Now, Milo,
there were a couple of times I expected him to kind of turn around and give Biden a look.
Yeah, I know it's all lost. Now, there's a few things. Obviously, I've got Brian on from Canada, but I'm going to zoom in onto domestic policy straight away because we're nearly 20 minutes in and I've got to get moving. Milo here obviously knows I do Doctor Who streams, I do Culture War streams, I do Talking TV streams. So, Milo, what's this got to do with Doctor Who? Nothing. Nobody said it was. It's called the Spin Sphere. Looking at the political spin. I've just done this weekend 4 Doctor Who live shows. So I think I've done Doctor Who. But I'm also doing Talking TV. That was the week that was Woke on Fridays. And I also, I get around. It's called retirement, Milo. So basically, Brian, I'll get you on when we've just introduced Trump's domestic agenda. And actually, we can start talking about that and where you see ramifications in Canada, we in Britain, Cliff in America. So everybody join in on what you're looking forward to and not regarding apparently Trump's domestic agenda. Here we go. Okay, domestic agenda. So I suppose I should ask Cliff first. I'll keep an eye on the thread, though, to start bringing them in because we've got people from everywhere. One bit of the domestic agenda you're either looking forward to the most or the least, just to make it spiky and get us going.
Well, the easiest one is the least. I could care less about Greenland. But I don't know where that's coming from. That's crazy talk. Things like renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Who cares? What I'm most excited about, and if they can actually pull it off with as little resistance as possible, is the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah.
We've got just massive bureaucracy that's now basically superseding the legislative process. So Congress is taking, or our a version of Parliament, taken out of it for lawmaking and policy making. They just tweak everything from within, whatever department it is, and that basically is creating law without consent of the people. The representatives are not doing it. It's not being enacted that way.
Now, you see, the way I've seen it from the outside, and you've got the Washington Post declaring here today, Elon Musk's Doge to be sued within minutes of Trump inauguration. The legal status of Musk's government waste panel will be challenged in federal court almost as soon as the president-elect is sworn in. Now, that's your worry, isn't it? That if you're going to get, I suppose if you're an opponent to what Trump is trying to do, you try and delay everything for 2 years and see if you can get Congress changed. I would have thought that's the game in town, because we're used to politics and how this sort of works. I mean, Jeremy, we've heard this before, haven't we? In our country, government waste, civil servants working from home, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it sounds to me a similar vibe going on there. And then I'll ask Brian about if he's heard anything about Canada. What are you thinking, Jeremy?
There's a lot of administration, and we're seeing a lot more of it in this country, and of course in the whole of Europe. And they need to cut down the red tape and all these extra charges they keep putting on. Particularly if you want to go to Europe, where they're going to introduce a new charge for British people to get to Europe.
Yeah.
We've got a British passport. That's all we need is a British passport. We don't want visas and something else. We should be able to travel without, another extra layer of administration.
I suppose some will argue that because we did Brexit, we got rid of the EU layers, but we then have to add our own, because obviously we can't just have no laws. So basically, I suppose there's all that. Divan and Dragon here, I'm going to try and bring people in as Brian's building up to eventually get through here. Doge is going to be a wonderful addition. The thing is, you see, Divan and Dragon, I hear this in Britain, government efficiency. It seems to be the easy hobby horse if somebody says they're going to save money, and then the next government says it, and the next government. And I sometimes wonder if it just sounds a bit popular to say we're going to deal with government efficiency. Brian, when you're coming from this one, it doesn't have to be about Doge, but Trump's domestic policy, looking forward to anything, dreading anything?
Well, for starters, that policy there, I'm not sure. Is that the one in the same one where they're going to be purging anybody who's deemed to be an enemy of the Trump administration? Basically, any Democrat working in there, they're going to kick them out.
I don't think it's not party line. That's the thing. It's run through the news media that way. But what he's basically said is, if you've got redundant agencies, if you have several agencies doing the same effective work, why have those three? Why 6? However many agencies? Reduce the staff, put it all under one umbrella, be more efficient. It's not a party line issue. But
have you read the Project 25?
I did read that, but that's also not his policy.
There was no mention at all about purging Democrats.
Well, I know, but that's not Trump's policy. It was said that it was, but he didn't have anything to do with it. It wasn't written for him. It was written by a think tank agency for political means.
Well,
I think a lot of people.
I'll have to reserve judgment until I see what happens.
I think a lot of.
Go on, Jeremy. Carry on.
I was just going to say, a lot of people, if they're working in American government and they are politically active and they're Democrats, and they don't like the atmosphere or the situation, they'll just leave on their own volition. They're just.
It's interesting, Brian, what we're saying here, because depending on where you are in Britain, and this is where I find these politics debates might be very interesting. We've talked about America initially, but there's ramifications in all our countries, similar things. In Britain, for example, you had a lot of civil servants who were anti-Brexit, a lot of civil servants who don't want to deport illegal migrants, and they have actively worked against the government, although they're paid by the taxpayer. So there is an element where there is an argument, if you are politically active in the civil service, you should just get on. You shouldn't be bringing your politics into sway because you're paid for by the taxpayer. And so Is that a similar type thing we're talking about here?
I see.
Is that a similar thing that we're discussing? Because if I was aware of civil servants in Whitehall in Britain actively working against government policy, which is basically, they've been elected to follow policy through, then they're being, you could argue, slightly undemocratic as civil servants. I was a civil servant. I was a teacher. I never imposed any of my attitude or politics in any classroom or assembly because that's the way I was taught. I now know teachers do, and I think that's disgusting. So are we saying with Doge, is this the bit, Brian, you're talking about, that if I was, say, a civil servant and I was being very Labour or Conservative in Britain, that they can now do a version of a witch hunt to get them out? Is that what you're saying that might happen?
Wouldn't phrase it like that, but yeah, basically, I think what the whole thing is just being disguised as weed out every Democrat we can out of government.
Right. Okay.
I mean, it's not just something you'll see on MSNBC or CNN. I mean, it's out there. You know what? When this show is over, I'm gonna have to do some digging. So that when we do this again, I'll actually have some notes sitting right next to me.
But this is the thing. I think it's always best that we say we're like lads in a pub, and we're discussing this as you would over a pint. We don't, when you go to the pub, you don't have all these manifestos and policies all on the table. You just it. We might have inaccuracies. The point is, we test it out. That's all.
Yeah, and I don't want to make any claims or statements that are like bona fide false. So if anything, if I can't quite.
Same from my point of view. I can only go by what they've told me, and the Vivek Ramaswamy's and Elon Musk, Donald Trump, those guys have said what this is about is cost overruns, legislative empowerment. They're changing things from within agencies that should be changes to law or go through as bills in Congress. So there's enough power in the governmental agencies that are not part of our three branches of government, and it costs a lot of money. So if we're going to save money, that's one really good place to start. Is just
one thing where you are almost sounding like Britain, because of course, if you change prime minister in Britain, they're in straight away. Power straight away. No transition over 3 months, like you do in America with a selection of appointments and nominations. But what's fascinating is it almost sounds a bit British, where with all this amount of executive orders he's discussing, and these are just a few. I mean, he's really going for, it's like a hit list, isn't it, of ideas. Eliminating DEI directives, ending Biden's limits on offshore drilling, national emergency on the US-Mexico border, mass deportation starting on Tuesday in Chicago, possibly. And the list goes on. Now,
that's the way to do it. That's the way to do it.
Well, to some people, that's extremely exciting. That's what they've voted for. And to some other people, as I will show here, just so I'm being fair on the right thing.
I mean, how long does it take the British government to implement changes? So slow, very slow.
Except I did also see, and I was just trying to find the page there, but it's not a problem, that there's a lot of people very worried about the mass deportation. So while there's the excitement on one side saying, here we go, on the other side, there's the kind of concern that, is this going to impinge on human rights? And that
the only people that are going to be worried about that are the people that are coming to America illegally or any country illegally, because they know that.
Say one thing that's not up here is his classification of the Mexican and South American cartels as terrorist organizations.
Yeah, I heard him say that.
That probably should also add some context to the deportation thing. We're not going to go after somebody who's been here for 15 years and try to get them back to Guatemala. That's not, it's easy to try to apply for citizenship, and maybe you should think about that. But we're going to go after criminal gangs and hardcore folks up front. And I think that sealing the border, getting the border, and the influx of people. I mean, it's just there's a lot of people, and they're unvetted. We don't know who is actually here, and I would think that the recent kind of incident in New Orleans indicates that there's some troubling stuff that could be coming across.
Oh, well, this is, but and this is I mean, we're getting similar discussions in Britain, and again, similarly warnings on how to be careful, how to talk about it, because, and I'm sure you do in Canada, because crossing the border into Canada, etc., etc. So here, just for the balance, the Trump administration is planning a large-scale immigration raid in Chicago, Illinois, starting Tuesday morning. And then the MSNBC host claims that Americans are scared and exhausted of Trump, and there will be resistance if he mass reports migrants. So I'm trying to show a bit of balance there regarding, the country's not all happy about what might happen next. Others are very excited. So when you look at that, I'm aware that the language we use is always very important, because in Britain, if you talked about mass deportations, number one, it's not going to happen. Number two, people say you are being too populist, or people say you are being unfair, that these people are all coming from war and all the rest of it. Now, I've heard the debates in America where Trump will sometimes talk about they're all pedophiles or they're all rapists. And again, I think that's inflated, isn't it? There's a lot of people just trying it on to get in, aren't there? That's basically it.
Well, it's inflated, but he also says a lot of stupid stuff. It's hard for me to defend Trump.
Yeah.
He says things sometimes that I'm just like, if you just, I don't know, get a thesaurus or something and go through there and find some alternative ways to relay this message, it probably would go over a lot better. But he's hyperbolic when it's unnecessary. We understand what he's trying to go after is the bad side, but he just doesn't. Classifying everybody coming across the border as pedophiles or rapists is not what is really happening. However, also according to international law, to be seeking asylum, you can't go through multiple countries to do that.
And we say the same in Britain, which is if you're coming from France is a very civilized country. So right. What you're fleeing from France.
But no journalists ever ask them the question, an illegal immigrant that comes into the UK, why did you not claim asylum in France?
Where you were.
Or the previous country that you were in, but said, no, I only want to come to the UK.
Yeah,
there's a huge percentage of Chinese nationals that are crossing the border here. Now, I don't know. I'm not a geographer. I'm pretty good at it, but I know China's not really close to Mexico. So
yeah.
There's some questions like that where how are they even getting to Mexico to cross the Mexican border? And those kind of things need to be looked into.
It seems to be there's a lot of countries. Let's be honest, all the countries in our United Nations, Brian, are not playing the same game, are they? Let's face it. Everybody's thinking, well, if they go through our country to yours, then it's your problem. It's all about cost. And so I think there's a game going on with a lot of countries that pretend they're all friends, but they're all passing the problem on. So like France are doing Britain no favors. They don't want us to turn the boats around and say, oh, here's your here's your refugees back. They don't want that cost. So of course the burden's on us, and it's happening in every country. What's your situation in Canada, America border, etc., Canada over there?
Well, I know that recently because of the, I'm not sure if it was the, I don't know if it was the tariff thing or something, but the border, they've reached a new agreement apparently to strengthen the American-Canadian border. It's the largest unguarded, shall we say, border. That's what we're famous for. It's the largest unguarded border in the world. That we're friends economically. Politically, we're more or less aligned. I mean, the United States, let's face it, they have their own culture, so to speak, that we don't quite share in Canada. But things are similar. But I mean, as far as border crossings go, yes, they're strengthening them up now. But
Now, Babette, I think Babette's talked to me a few times online, and I think you're New York. Am I right, Babette? You say the war on immigrants is a way of using racism to ensure that Social Security and Medicare are deconstructed. Now, these are all views on here. I will not challenge people's views on here, but everybody's got different views or different slants on things. My version of that, Babette, with a British slant, is it's not a war on immigrants. Obviously, it's the language, isn't it? It's not a war on immigrants. There's a concern that we can't afford it. For example, in Britain, 54% of the country is claiming some form of social benefit. 54% of the country is claiming more than they're putting into tax.
Mm.
Now that's going to bankrupt the United Kingdom eventually. So therefore, Babette, we need to look at every cost going. And obviously, if you've got a porous border where your numbers are quite high, and actually in Britain, we put them in hotels, we give them mobile phones, we give them money, and we've got people who are old having to pay their heating bills while other people are in hotels. So, you know, it's not a war on immigration. I think it's a war on waste. And it's an anger that the countries are getting poorer relatively, and the politicians need to sort it out. Money's going down lots of drains.
And the UK is £4.5 trillion in debt.
Yeah. There's a problem in Western Europe is not affording its liberal views. It's not affording it at all.
I don't know how much America's debt now stands at, but
it's multiple trillions. It's higher than it ever has been. And
yeah,
that's not really immigration issues are not as much part of it as spending on wars we don't need to be involved in, and
I think it's right that we all kind of ask our governments to be accountable. So Babette's just said she's in Florida. Thanks for that correction, because for some reason I thought you were in New York. So not that it matters, but
that makes me feel just a little. That makes me feel so much better.
Now, if I just show you facts are always better than just kind of saying various things. I do want to show you facts, so you can see with the American situation as it is, the facts are there. With Obama's time, he was in for 8 years, 4.5 million illegal aliens, 4.3 under Trump, then 10.4 under Biden Harris. Wow. And you can just see with a longer view, you can view George W. Bush and Obama on the left. You can see how it has become a global phenomenon. It's not just America. The numbers everywhere seem to be getting higher. And then, of course, people do seem to start to notice, and they have in Britain too, in this case, interracial violent incidents per capita of offending race. And you can see that there is a problem that needs to be dealt with, whether it's crime, whether it's been affordable. There's an awful lot. And actually, since you were on, and I can give a British context as Jeremy can, but there you go with Canada, Brian. Wow. And obviously Trudeau, we've lost now, haven't we? We're losing him soon. And I'm just wondering whether this is to do with Trump. Is it to do with internal politics? Is it to do with your economy? Is it to do with what I'm showing you on the screen now? What are your thoughts, Brian, on that?
I mean, that is just way too complicated for me to give an answer on. So many factors in that.
The answer is probably yes. Any and all of the above, maybe.
Put it this way, Brian, and I'll come back to you on this one. Canada, your immigration numbers have gone up. In Britain, they've gone up. In America, they've gone up. In France, they've gone up. In Germany, they've gone up. And every country is starting to have internal political fights about this issue. It seems to be an issue that the West needs to get a handle on.
You're saying political fights, though, not actual. Are we talking crime, like actual people, citizens?
Are we talking what? Sorry.
Are we talking about citizens attacking each other? Or are you talking just politics? There's a bumping of heads. Like, if you could have both.
I think, yeah, it's a bit of both. I mean, I'm talking about every population is increasing quickly, fast. And I don't honestly think any of our democracies can cope with that, because it's only America who's going for growth. The rest of us are quite stagnating. So we can't afford the increase in population that fast. Slowly you can, but not fast.
I could get a little conspiratorial if you want me to go that route just for just a second. Only in the sense that a lot of the kind of far right Republican thinking is that this influx was to, in a lot of ways, what Babette was talking about, bring in a constituency, get them on to the government dole, and then you've essentially developed a voter base. You've increased your voter base. That's why we have Haitian immigrants in Ohio. That Trump got a lot of rap for saying that they were eating the cats or something. But my question the whole time was, I don't really know what they're eating, but how did the Haitians get to Ohio, and why are they in Ohio? They're from Haiti.
Why does that matter?
Well, no, I'm just saying that they were brought there for a purpose. They were put there in that community for some reason. I guess because there's a lot of real estate, or it could be that along that.
If I was an immigrant to a country and I spoke a certain language or whatever the country made, let's pick one out of the blue here, like Rwanda. Obviously, when I came to the country, I would like to be able to live in a Rwandan community, or at least people around me who, I could socialize with and discuss things with, and make me feel make the transition a little easier to the new country. Which I believe, yes, from what I recall about the whole eating the cats and dogs thing. Yes, it's a neighborhood that was actually, there were quite a few. The population is high, and I think it's for exactly that reason. If you know that there's a group of people from your home country there, it's only natural to say, why don't we live there with them? I mean, I think not everybody's going to say that, but I certainly would, for instance.
No, I know, and remember, this debate is about porous borders, and I am an immigrant too. I emigrated to Australia. And I applied, I paid a lot of money, I filled a lot of paperwork out. I had to commit to 2 years not taking any social benefit, 2 years not using their Medicare facilities without me paying personally, having lots of medicals to check I wasn't taking a disease over or a long-term ailment. I agreed with all that. That is common sense to me. And I got extra points for being able to speak English because, of course, it's an English-speaking country, Australia. So that's called how you do immigration. Then, of course, the Australians deal with illegal immigration, which is their turn the boats round back to Indonesia. And, of course, most of the world slag them off for it. Now, we are all countries where our borders are quite porous and the country's population has increased quite fast. We clearly can't afford it, and clearly people are cheating a system when actually, if there's an immigration system, you apply. You don't just walk into a country, you apply. Exactly. Now, if you are seeking refuge because you are an asylum seeker, you are a refugee from war or something dangerous, then it's your first country port of call, next one along. That's the United Nations rule. But that's what we're saying. How come they're going from Haiti to America or from Afghanistan to Britain? It's like, well, you've come through France, Poland, and all these other countries. You're not applying the refugee rule. What you're doing is you quite fancy the benefits or the people who are in Britain or America or Canada, because, as you say, there's a group who understand you and you want to be with it.
Well, I mean, back in the day, you would hop a boat across the ocean, giving you more or less, depending where you were, a direct route. But I mean, if you're obviously within Africa, there's going to be a bunch of other countries within the continent, but there are direct routes, like you were saying earlier. I don't know how you get from China to Mexico or back up and then to the States. I don't know how that's done, but
and again, but by the same token, what actually are they fleeing from Haiti?
Yeah, well, that's
the question I have too. I've been there. It's quite nice.
There was a legitimate, there was an asylum seeker here in Canada and she had said that if I go back home to Afghanistan, I'm dead. And surprisingly, they sent her back, which utterly shocked me. It was a bona fide asylum seeker, and they sent her home.
Yes, go on, Jeremy. You carry on.
Just a quick one. You've got to prove that you're in danger in a particular country. You've got to have evidence that there will be a problem, and a lot that come over here don't have the evidence or the proof, and that's obviously when they go through the system, they'll say, well, have you got any evidence to claim that you're an asylum seeker?
You
and
see,
if they haven't,
and also it's a question. It's not a question of immigration. I think that's the other thing. The people are coming from Haiti, and they're going to go into a community that's in Ohio, and they have a tradition of families moving to the country, to the United States that way. That's fine. What I'm concerned with is migration, and that's much more of the problem that we're having here. Being in Texas, right on the border, we do have those Hispanic, Latino communities in Houston and all on Texas.
But the two go hand in hand: migration and illegal immigration as well. This is what we have here in this country, and there need to be much more tougher, proper controls.
There needs to be, it needs to be. I would love people to immigrate here. Well, that's what we were basically founded upon. That is not liking the British people anymore. But we want people to come here. We want people to come here and be part of the freedom that we have here, right? Ostensibly, just running into the border and being given a pass. A lot of people crossing the border are given the promise to come to your immigration hearing in 2 years from now, and then flown to someplace else or put on a bus. They're never going to come back. They're never going to go through the process. So we don't know where they are. We don't know where they've come from. We don't know why.
Yeah. And Simon Anthony, I know you're on the more liberal side of things. You're one of our panelists. Immigrants will only assimilate to a country if the society here is better than the one they're left. Now, that can be economically too. We can stop immigration by being an utterly horrible society. Bad plan. Well, why don't we just be a country who knows what a border is? We know what our immigration policy is. We allow numbers in and we allow a number of refugees in, but we control it and we know what we're doing. At the moment, it sounds to me as though America and Britain and other countries are saying, we don't know the numbers, we don't know who, and we can't deal with it. And then, yes, that will play into racism, that will play into horrible stuff. If every country controlled their border, had a proper immigration policy and a fair refugee asylum seeker policy, then the racists would have to go somewhere else. The trouble is, we've got bad leadership, I would personally say, in politics.
And bad management.
Yeah.
Bad management of the whole situation in terms of allowing people in unchecked, etc., etc.
Most people in most countries are not horrible people. Most people are mainstream, and most people will give a fair crack of the whip to asylum seekers, will understand their plight, will understand to be compassionate, and will understand each country needs an influx of immigration to grow and to be great, but not out of control and not unpaid for, and not people shortcutting the system and queue jumping. And that's all down on the politician. This is not about being racist or angry or anything. This is just saying our politicians need to do a better job. They need to come up with policies. They need to come up with a plan. They need to do that. And then refugees are protected. A compassionate refugee system is protected, and people won't argue about it. You'll have immigration controlled and happening. Not go away, everybody. No. I don't hear anybody really saying that apart from the racists.
No, Trump said it. Why can't we get more people from Denmark and this country? Why do we have to get people from all these asshole countries?
Yes,
he's referring to people of color and minorities. And there's a lot of people out there who agree with what he said.
What color are people from Denmark?
White.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know. I don't know the
saying,
demographics of Denmark.
he was saying, I want white immigrants. Why can't we get more white immigrants? Why do we have to get more people from asshole countries? And the whole nation was shocked that he said it.
Yeah.
Of course.
The truth is, Brian, as Cliff said, Trump does say things that sometimes
to get a reaction.
Yeah, and a way off beam as well, and an incendiary. But all I'm saying is, underneath all that, I do think each country needs to control their borders and control their immigration numbers and know what they're doing. Now, he adds color maybe into it. He adds ethnicity onto it. I don't. But the country,
Stephen Miller does.
But even the asshole countries like he's referring to, it's a stupid comment. But what he's talking about is economically very bad situation. Countries that have terrible economic balance. They're not looking after the people. Maybe these people are refugees, but getting them 10,000 at a time a month is an inundation of people that we can't cope with, and we're going to try to. Where are we housing these people? We've started putting them in buildings that aren't set for this. They're not. We're going to run out of ways to even take care of people before we find out if they have a legitimate reason to be here.
Well, we have a great.
They showed up.
We have a greater problem to that extent that you've just described in this country, and we're a small country, a very small country. And there are bigger. There are bigger countries.
I'm sorry about that.
Sorry. There are bigger countries that actually could take a lot of asylum seekers or whatever. But the UK is just not built for the sheer numbers now, and it's having a pull on our resources in terms of the National Health Service, housing, which we do not have enough of, and it is costing a lot of money, and people are going to have to pay more taxes very soon.
That's when that's when the agenda's lost, because people who are just surviving economically in Britain, in Canada, in America, elsewhere, a bit of anger might come in, a bit of envy. So it's up to the politicians to up their game on this, to make sure that the people are happily mixing and happily coping with what's happening. But people aren't. And that's when it gets dangerous, because, people are more, look, do this, do that, do this, do this. I'm not hearing anybody saying, shut the border. I'm not hearing anybody say, go crazy. Now, we can cope with numbers coming into Britain. It's just that we can't, at the moment, we're not even adding them up. We're not, I
don't think we can cope. I don't think we can cope. And it will come to a head when they run out of hotels, etc. Because
I would also say that some of the numbers you're seeing on these graphs are probably, I was looking at the details to see if it was actual estimated counts or encounters. Encounters is when our border patrol gets somebody and either processes them or turns them around, and so the same person can be encountered multiple times, and or they're sent into the country to go through the process.
Yeah,
but that's not the number of people that are coming in without being encountered.
No, I agree that there's going to be more. Every country should just know the number. That's all. It should be quite easy. I mean, that would put everybody at peace, and everybody would go, it's controlled. We all know what's happening. And coming to your point, Brian, you could have a politician who mentions, I don't know, ethnicity and stuff like that, skin color, whatever. But in the end, every country should know if he was really doing that. I remember Australia had a whites only policy in the 50s, didn't they? Countries have had some terrible moments when they've said, we only want, I suppose, Anglo Caucasian, that's what they did. Now they've got
that's what they're doing now. I mean, everybody here is familiar with Jason Miller, right?
No.
Or I would at least maybe Cliff. He's a white nationalist who's just beyond the top. Like
What's his job? What's his job?
I don't know what his job is in this administration. All I know is that it's You know, I just want to punch it up on my phone right now. I do. I so badly want to find out what it is he's doing. Actually, and you know what, Brendan, maybe you would be more qualified to do that than me, because like my brain turns to mush when I start multitasking.
Well, what's his name? What's his name?
It looks like he was
Jason Miller.
Jason
What-
Miller.
Jason
Maybe
Miller.
He was for the 2018 Trump campaign. He was one of the people involved in that. I don't know.
Shaved head or bald, one or the other.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he sounds like he could be
Okay.
anywhere from.
He's
you know,
one of
just
the
kind
top
of
brass now, and he's very famous for.
He was a senior advisor on the 2020 campaign, CEO, American communications strategist. He became a contributor to CNN, blah, blah, blah. There'd be a lot for me to read fast, that's all.
Yeah.
But what was his? And I'm pretty involved in politics. My wife can tell you. I don't shut up about it. But I'm not familiar with him at all, so I don't know how prominent he is. Even in, it may have been, but maybe not now. So I don't know what his stance was.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, if I was to just condense it, he's basically whites only.
And but what's his?
That's an exaggeration. He's pro-white, white immigrants, whatever. Everybody of color, get them out of the country.
I know, but what I'm trying to do is the whole administration saying that, or have they got somebody on the side who says that? Because you know, with our debate in this country, if you actually just argue for control of borders and control of immigration, people suddenly say Farage, or they suddenly say Enoch Powell, or they suddenly say Nazis, and you go, hold on a minute, I'm only saying what every country used to do. And so what I'm saying is this Jason Miller in the administration and he's in control of immigration policy or anything like that, or is he just one of those fringe ones that you sometimes get?
Oh no, he's in there. Actually, I'm going to bring it up right now. Oh boy.
I would also. Today is a commemorative holiday in America.
Yes. Yeah.
For Martin Luther King.
Yes.
And I've always advocated. I was raised from a little child to not even really. I had best friends in elementary school, grade school, growing up that were all kinds of different skin colors, and it never even occurred to me. Now we're really supposed to be thinking about this as a factor, and it keeps getting thrown back in that if I'm anti-immigration, then that must make me a racist. And quite frankly, it really is the most horrible thing you can intimate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and connect me to in my character.
We have this over here with the
so far away from everything that I've framed my political ideology and everything around. It's abhorrent. Even the bifurcation, even trying to make a race is something that's archaic. The concept of it. So what we're talking about in terms of economic stability, and I think it goes back to what Jeremy was saying. You can only handle so many people. It doesn't matter whether they're from Denmark, which may be preponderant, the preponderance of more Caucasian people. But now even the word Caucasian is deemed racist. I'm having a hard time keeping up with the terminology.
Yeah. And also on the western border of Europe, it's well known that the Russians are using mass migration as a weapon.
Yeah.
So they are. I mean, Poland, well done, has managed to really seal their borders because the Russians were making their borders porous and they couldn't cope with the numbers.
It was Finland as well.
Finland as well.
Yeah.
And these politics are full of irony because at the moment, the prime minister or president of Poland is Donald Tusk, who was the head of the EU, who was against Britain when we said we wanted Brexit. And he said, "Oh, you're terrible people. You know, you want the drawbridge up. You want to shut your borders." He's just shut his borders. And you think there's always an irony about this because in the end, you look after your country first. You have to. There's an element where start with your country, seal the borders. And when I mean seal the borders, you let so many numbers in, you know who they are and you know where they're going. But, I mean, Germany shut their borders in the last year. They do it willy-nilly, but when we were in the EU, you weren't allowed to do it. So it's just an interesting concept that everybody does it when they need to. Now, I'm going to throw us about a bit, everybody in the thread, because obviously we're international as well as everything else. And so let's talk about, for a few moments, Trump's global agenda, and whether anybody's got concerns there, because we've got...
Could I make a quick correction there?
Go on.
I may have confused two names, rightfully so. Did I say Jason Miller before, or did I say Stephen Miller? Okay, yeah, no. Stephen Miller is the person that I was referring to. Jason Miller
rings a bell.
Okay, so if everybody looks up Stephen Miller, and then they might tell us in the thread. So I'll go to global.
So yes, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I'll go to global agenda next. Here we go. So this could get interesting because obviously, and of course, you've still got plenty to say, Cliff, as an American, of course. I mean, you mentioned, I find it interesting, Cliff, when you mentioned as part of domestic policy and you mentioned Greenland, I was sat there thinking, that's foreign policy, surely. But you grabbing countries.
Well, he's saying lunatics. I think it's all cage rattling phraseology, you know, like,
yeah.
I don't want Canada to be another state of the union. That's ridiculous.
I'm fascinated. Can I just say for a few moments? And I was talking to Brian about this the other day. We talked about Alaska, didn't we? Because I thought, well, Alaska was bought by America. I tell you what a deal that was, because they bought it from Russia. And they bought it for, in today's money, it would be $129 million in today's money. From the Russian Empire. And the Russian Empire thought they were being clever, selling it to America to counterbalance the British Empire. Oh, what happened to that? So basically, the Americans and their American empire, speech marks, was created by the Russians trying to topple the British. You must learn more, Russia. So they give away Alaska cheaply. So there you go. So I was fascinated when Donald Trump suddenly in 2025 talked about grabbing a country and then grabbing the Panama Canal. And I thought, can you do that nowadays?
But the Russians took Crimea. They grabbed that.
They did, but I didn't think we were on their side. But yeah, I mean, I find it very fascinating. As Heather WP says here, America wants to become colonizers. It's very ironic. It is ironic, I must say, because that sort of language is like, I thought the British Empire were the naughty boys. You know, we were, oh, you terrible colonizers, you lot, said America many, many times. And can we have Greenland? Can we have Panama? As Donald Trump says, we didn't like the Panama Canal deal. We that was bad. Well, yeah, but the deal's done. He knows the art of the deal. The deal's over, mate. You can't grab it back. Surely.
I think his wording is flawed. And once again, you know, if Canada or parts of Canada would like to not be part of Canada and want to join us as another state, you're more than welcome. I think that kind of rhetoric is both rattling the cages and making a point of his political stance without being like, you know, military's not off the table. Those kind of statements are just asinine.
Yeah. He says these. Yeah, he says these to get a reaction,
right,
and to get people sort of. Yes.
And as a general Trump supporter, it gets the wrong reaction from me. I don't want that being telegraphed. Yep. That's not the attitude of America.
But I also think that it gets people thinking. They think, maybe we better cooperate with America just a little bit and give a little bit to placate this statement. You know, saying we should take over Greenland and take over this.
I found it fascinating in many ways, and me and Brian had a good discussion about this because I mean, to say this in 2025 without going to war and stuff is like what? But to be honest, I just thought, look, come on, Greenland has got many, many resources from oil to everything. I mean, hello, under its ground is a lot of stuff, and Donald Trump's no mug. And you know, if he's thinking of just America, he's thinking we could have more resources, not rely on the world, then China can do whatever it does when it holds the world to ransom, but we won't pay part of that. And he's looking after America. Very nice if you can get that. As British, I'm thinking, well, we're stuffed because you know, we will in the end be buying everything from China regarding for car batteries and all the rest of it. So we will be on a bound to be working with China. So of course, America is cheekily saying they might like to grab stuff so they can be extremely independent economically when the rest of us will be stuffed. But we need America to be strong in the West to counterbalance China and Russia. Let's be honest, they're expanding them. You know.
Yeah, I agree. And
I mean,
sorry.
Well, let me ask
Canada, the 51st state.
Yes, we have.
Nobody believes that Trump's going to invade Canada, and take it over, and invade Greenland and take it over.
He won't invade, but he is going to try to use economic pressures on us. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
He's using levers and crowbars to get what he wants.
Yeah, I think one of the most heartwarming things I have seen out of all of that over the last couple of weeks was a man in Texas who was saying to the camera, I love Trump. I'm voting for Trump, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Canada's our neighbor. Canada's our friend. Leave them alone. And I was impressed. I was like, okay, the guy actually knows what's right and wrong, draw the line. But when I hear people saying that they want the U.S., like when they want Canada, some people are Canadians. There's a small group of Canadians who actually think joining the U.S. would be a good idea. And there's some Americans who think it would be great. And there are also some Americans who are under the most ridiculous notions that if they joined the U.S., if Canada joined, they said, well, if I live in Canada, we'll get free health care. It's like, no, you won't. We're going to be under the U.S. system, you idiot.
Yeah.
I mean, my God.
The only thing I can say is we would acquire some really good hockey teams. That would be I mean, the most.
I was going to make a joke earlier as to my technical difficulties getting on here earlier and say, oh, we only just got the internet in Canada a week or two ago, eh? But you know what? I personally love it when we're poked fun at. I personally love it. I think it's hilarious.
We should ask now because Trump has only got in the last few hours today officially, but Trudeau didn't last that long after that meeting in Mar-a-Lago. I mean, let's face it, there seems to have been a chain of events, which is there was a cheeky talk between Trump and Trudeau. Trudeau goes back to Canada. Then some internal politics in Canada happens and Trudeau suddenly has to resign. Brian, what happened?
I honestly can't answer that. I don't know. I was just as surprised as everybody else. I mean, I've always known that Trudeau was not popular. You know, I can remember when I was a child and his father was in power. I didn't understand. Like, we're talking a little kid who doesn't understand how the whole process works. And then one day somebody said, Brian Mulroney is our prime minister. Like, what do you mean? Trudeau is our prime minister. And then you find out how the whole thing works. So now that isn't Canada the Commonwealth? Yes, it is.
Yeah, and me and Brian were saying that as well, that Donald Trump, in his overplaying his Greenland and Canada hand, actually is technically insulting King Charles, because King Charles is the king of Canada, and him saying jokingly he wants Canada as the 51st state is actually saying that the British Empire is over, which it is, and he wants to grab his own empire. That's kind of technically what's going on. I mean, it's a cheeky move, but it's actually quite imperial. It's quite colonial, I think, is the language when it's attacking at Britain. But the Americans sometimes forget that.
He likes to get people's attention by taking them right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, as far as Trudeau goes, I mean, I'm a liberal, big time. I can't stand the guy. I really can't. It
just seemed like too many balls dropped. It wasn't even a question of policy. It was just a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, he's got a very pompous, arrogant,
Well, it's a
just
bit
it
indulgent,
rubs
isn't
a lot
it?
of people the wrong way for starters, and then plus he took advantage of like taking vacations on taxpayer money allegedly over and over again.
Mm.
I think
It
you have
got
to.
to I don't like hypocrisy. And when
Yeah.
someone says we're not going to do this type of thing and then they do it, I'll call them out on it. So yeah, I really
Well,
do not like
Trudeau,
it. I don't like it.
like you said, Trudeau's a bit of a. It's like the George Bush Senior and George W. Bush. You've got a kind of gosh, it's like a dynasty. And yes, out of a country with 300 million people, that you suddenly get a son and a dad, also both president. Stunning. Um, Kennedy's,
Oh no, 32 million.
in your country, but how in America
Oh,
can that? It's the
oh
same
yeah,
thing. They're playing
yeah.
dynasty, and that's not good for democracy. It shouldn't be the plaything of billionaires. Democracy. It shouldn't. It
Mm.
should be the best person on merit. All these politicians, including Trump, talk about DEI and everything should be on merit. Merit is not money. Merit is merit.
Mm.
Actually, and that's what sometimes gets mixed up, which is, but I've got more money based on merit. Well, blah, blah, blah. So, just to throw a little cheeky one in here, Cliff. In Britain, regarding global agenda, we picked our UK ambassador for the America, Lord Peter Mandelson, who was the EU commissioner, and obviously he's very Labour, and he has slagged off Trump for years. And we've picked him as UK ambassador, and it's not gone down well with the American president,
Yeah.
and he might reject it. Now, do you think that's a Trump problem or a British government problem?
Both.
Yeah, have we been people?
It's Starmer picking somebody he knows is going to be problematic dealing with Trump, right?
Yeah,
But it's also Trump pushing back again with too hard to push. I mean, I really think that all of this, adding Greenland as a state and all that kind of thing is to start the bar high and in a ludicrous position,
yeah.
and then walk it back to come to compromises. I don't. He just doesn't know. He just doesn't play the rhetorical game like normal, like normal people would. He doesn't say things the same way. He wants to start off with offense, and
Yeah.
being
But
offensive to people to then walk it back to kindness. He's done it with Marco Rubio here in the United
but
States.
this is what I mean. The art of politics surely is you pick the staff according to your opponent. And I would have said Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, has not played a good hand here, because you're getting the backup of the person who should be one of your chief allies. What do you reckon, Jeremy?
Well, he hasn't got a good hand to start off with, whoever he
Yeah,
picks.
no.
I mean, you've got David Lammy as.
Has he done yet? Has he
Well,
done a good hand yet?
Well, nearly all the British government have slagged off Trump in the last 4 years. So the Labour government are all red-faced and don't know what to do. And
the whole cabinet needs to be replaced with a new team, and that the Prime Minister needs to go.
well, what about the
And
Mayor of London? The
and
Mayor of London,
this,
Trump's come into London, and Sadiq Khan has warned Western democracy is at risk from a resurgent fascism ahead of the Donald Trump inauguration.
yeah,
How to win friends and influence
but
people.
but this is interesting because all the Labour politicians in the cabinet were slagging Donald Trump off before they got into office.
Yes.
Now they're in office, but and no one has told Sadiq Khan, look, keep it buttoned, right? Keep quiet. We don't want you to keep slagging off Trump. We've got to deal with this guy, and that's what they should. That's what Starmer should have said right away, or simply just removed Sadiq Khan from office. Just say your job's gone. That's it.
I'm hoping from something from Trump that is an edict that says we're never going to use the word fascist anymore. When I think fascist, I think Mussolini, right? I don't know why
that's what
we're diluting the word fascist a bit.
But the problem with this British government is that if everybody disagrees with them and not their way of thinking, they call people here right wing or fascist. I don't think they use the word terms fascist, but they certainly use the term
It's in
right
tandem.
wing,
It's in
which
tandem
is
here too.
which
And
is the
there,
same. Yeah.
Yeah.
there have been a couple of really strong right wing fascists. Adolf Hitler and Mussolini. This is nothing.
Yeah, but that was
I
years
think
ago.
walking back that rhetoric is going to be the challenge, because
Yeah,
now we've
and
got we've got the target of it back
Yeah.
in office. So
Yeah, I mean, I did a Doctor Who stream. By the way, I'll say this again. I did a Doctor Who stream yesterday, and one of the trolls said I was far right. And you think the language has just gone so stupid.
Yeah.
You know, far right is, you know what, 1930s and 40s Germany. Excuse me, let's get real. If you know your history, if you're an educated, mature person, that's where you go. If
the National
you're saying you
Socialist
don't
Party,
like,
if I
you know,
recall.
and and they don't like something I say about Doctor Who makes me that. How immature, how stupid, how ill-educated. Go away. Stop it. Grow up. I can't believe that far right has played into the agenda so much. There are fringes in every country. Let's be truthful. But they are fringes. And for the mainstream politicians to play this dangerous game, when Keir Starmer in Britain said that anybody who was angry about the Southport killings, based on was it an illegal immigrant or not? Of course, I can't say anything. It's still a court case, so if you don't mind. But that there was a big fuss, and of course, he's a lawyer, and he told Britain in a speech, people who are thinking that way are far right. Well, he's in the latest YouGov survey, that's 76% of the country. It's dangerous talk from silly politicians.
Yeah.
As I keep saying, politicians need to be better, more mature, cleverer, have a vision, and have a policy, and not play silly word games. It's just too dangerous.
Yeah.
Well,
Now, I do have a question
if I
in
may-
terms of
if I may.
British politics. You guys have the referendum election approach. Is that what it's called? When you can popularly just try to get a new prime minister?
It's a general election.
General election.
Or general election.
The next one's around 2030.
Or sooner.
But there's an emergency process where it can be petitioned to the parliament.
No.
It depends. It depends on just how bad things get in the country.
Okay, so we don't have anything like that.
He's got a massive majority. He'd need so many Labour MPs to disappear. It's not possible. Brian,
you'd have to have a no confidence vote in the government,
and they're not going to do it. Yeah. They're not going to. Go on, Brian.
Yeah, what you mentioned yesterday about trolls saying you're probably far right, etc.
Yeah,
there was. I was busy at the time actually, and I missed it. But my wife actually heard it at least once or twice, and her ears perked up at the use of the term grooming. Now, I would like to say, before we could even start any kind of talk on the word grooming, and we're all talking about Russell T Davies putting trans characters and gay characters, et cetera, everybody under the rainbow. What do we define grooming as?
Well, for me, I've never used the verb.
Because I've seen people say, they're grooming our children.
Other people.
They're grooming our children.
And I'm not going to.
And I would love to know what that means.
I'd love to. It's clearly pejorative.
Yes,
but I don't use it, and I don't think any of four of us have used it here. And so
No, I don't believe so. But she heard it on the podcast yesterday.
Well, it is possible. I mean, there was
which really shocked.
Well, the verb's allowed, but
it's allowed, but it's the idea behind it.
I
mean, let's face it.
I can't recall if she heard it. She heard it. I mean, obviously, I was running.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to make you uncomfortable. I don't mean to make you uncomfortable.
I'm not uncomfortable because it's the English language and it's pejorative. I missed it in the debate yesterday, but there's no reason why I should be called what I was called, of course. And of course, if the panelist did say the word grooming, it's not illegal. It is pejorative, and of course, you'd hope it was backed up. Normally, if I heard something like that, I would have asked them for clarification, because I don't normally allow that language on my channel about a TV show, because come on. However,
Sure.
that's a different debate, a different time.
Okay.
But yeah, the talk is dangerous. I say it a lot to people, to me, when they say you're this, you're that, you're talk. Hold on a minute. Hyperbole,
Mhm.
come down a bit, come down a notch. Let's play the ball, not the man. Come on. And I just find people don't like to hear contrary viewpoint. I think people almost do want to cancel the contrary viewpoint. I think debate is a dying art. And I'm shocked by it. I mean, let's face it, if it is about Doctor Who, it's a TV program. Perspective, please. This is about running a country. It's about people's wages, people's security. It's bigger stuff. Let's be honest. Politics is everything.
Oh, if you're referring to earlier, I just meant that grooming thing is a huge thing right now in the States with the banning of books, because if there's any mentions of homosexuality in a book, it's gone. They yank it out of the library. I'm not saying every library, school library, but there are many school libraries where if there's any material that they deem to be on the LGBTQ plus agenda, out the door it goes.
Well, let's. I mean, while we're on it, I mean,
I have two young boys. If I can step
go
in.
on. Yeah.
There's things that I want to control what they're exposed to. That's all. And I think the main reaction I get when somebody says that they were grooming is, my reaction is not to the word grooming. It's the word they. That's the structure of who they're targeting and what they're where their feelings lie. I personally am okay with grooming is used as a means of bringing somebody into your ideology. Now that could be me grooming some Doctor Who fans, which I'm trying to do with my kids.
It's generally what it's used for, though. When people are saying they're grooming them, it's like the old. There used to be films that were made back, I think it was in the 50s or 60s. There's a very famous one on YouTube called "Beware the Homosexual."
Oh,
and it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing. And it's actually, some people would laugh at first when you start watching it, but then you realize, no, this was real.
Oh, yeah.
And now now the same thing is being applied, but
that's where I
hold on. Now let me just kind of get into that. I'm not killing the debate. I'm going to move it on, but I'll just kind of segment it for everybody. We're moving around here.
Yeah.
So, Brian, what you were saying there is a bit on this cultural agenda, I would call it. All right. So let me go straight to it now. I'm just trying to always have information, always have things at hand. So there's a various things that he has said in the executive order and he's going to do over the next 4 years, as is his right as the president of the United States. One of them is getting rid of critical race theory programs in schools. Teach American greatness, not hate, is what his says. He then talks about DEI, and he talked today in his speech, didn't he, about 2 genders only. So that would, I suppose, hit the LGBTQ agenda to a degree, because he's actually insisting that you go back to just teaching 2 genders. So this is what I would call the cultural debate that is alive in the West. I find it fascinating. It's not alive in other countries. It's a Western thing. And I find it's sometimes a way we eat ourselves alive while the rest of the world just gets on with trying to make money. And so I'm fascinated that the West is obsessed with this agenda. And, in the end, argues the toss and half the time over and out. So where do we all stand on this one? You've mentioned grooming. At the moment, Brian, grooming in Britain, the only thing the we're thinking about is grooming gangs, because that's the big talk in Britain today, is the grooming gangs. So when you hear the verb grooming, I know I hear it with discussion of Doctor Who, but that's small scale. Everybody in Britain wants a public inquiry into the grooming gangs that have raped and tortured and caged loads of working class white girls in Britain in the last 2 decades. That's the big debate in Britain when it comes to grooming. And the British government, for some reason, is trying not to do that big inquiry.
Well, we know what the reason is.
Well, we suspect that they may be protecting some of their own, so to speak.
Yeah.
Could we start on the first slide, actually, about the
yes, critical race theory?
Critical race theory. I just can't fathom why you would want to whitewash your own history like that. Well, I mean, depending on who you are.
Can everybody concisely tell me roughly what their understanding of what is critical race theory? Because some of these terms have come from America, and in Britain, I'm going, what's this? What's that? We had lockdown. Suddenly, we had Black Lives Matters, and suddenly people were talking about critical race theory. It happened quite fast. And I wasn't really aware. The joke is it's come from California. You know, everyone says it always originates over there. I don't really know truly. What's your understanding, Cliff, what critical race theory is that he's trying to get rid of?
It's largely, it stems from critical theory, which is essentially breaking down tropes and whatever it is you're talking about. And the critical race theory is not different. It's about breaking down the historical tropes of how race has been utilized, how it still is utilized, what the historical context of things are, representation within that context. And, we've got a pretty dark context here in the United States.
Yeah.
Again, going back to Martin Luther King Jr. here today, what doesn't seem to enter into the whole satisfactory realm of critical race theory is that we also sort of ended it. I mean, France was a little ahead of us in ending slavery, and then we ended it. And now I think if you look in the statistics globally, there's more slaves now. Slavery is more prevalent now than it ever has been. We're talking about not seeing the forest for the trees. I think people are arguing critical race theory in order to make points that largely also ignore. It's not about whitewashing as much as it is focusing on different things that then balance things differently. I'm trying to be more diplomatic.
I mean, it's not how it feels to me in Britain, and I think there can be different understandings. Jeremy, what's your understanding of it? And do you approve of it, or would you? I mean, what is your understanding of it?
I'm not entirely sure that I do actually understand what critical race theory is.
I've heard it.
I've heard of it.
Everybody says the same thing, so don't feel bad at all. Everybody says it. Even me sometimes.
This is about education of race and
yes, it is. Yeah, it's education. For instance, like if you wanted teaching about slavery, they don't want to do it anymore. They don't want to remind people what America did.
That's not really true, and it also depends on the state curriculum. Or we have curriculum by state here in the U.S., so it's not.
So that means some states could then.
It's either emphasized or de-emphasized. I know that here in Texas, we don't. I mean, it's not something that you shy away from. It's part of the curriculum. It's part of our history. I mean, what bothers me is that we keep adding more history as we go through each decade, and we don't seem to keep adding more curriculum.
This is where, and I don't use the word grooming, but some in the thread are saying the link to education. What were you saying? Were you going to say, Jeremy, then about this?
I was just going to say that if they don't want to teach it in schools, people can find that information online now, or go to a library and read about these things. In my day, obviously, it was if you didn't know a terminology, you just had to go to the library. There was no internet.
Yeah. I'm fascinated. Look, if I put up his slide first of all, because sometimes you've got the hyperbole, but behind it there's something. So, cancel critical race theory programs in schools. Teach American greatness, not hate, is the full statement there. So, when I look at that, I'm thinking, is the conflation being made there that some believe critical race theory has gone too far, guilting lots of kids going to school over stuff that they weren't responsible for? Because there is an argument that when you've got young kids, what is education, right? As an educationalist, I'll have free rein here for a second. Is education to give them the weapons for life to get a good job, to be a decent citizen? Or is education to guilt them, to shame them, that the country they're born into has done bad stuff in the past? And I think some people would say some elements of educational programs are guilting people too much when the kid hasn't.
Those people need to freaking toughen up then.
Well, no,
Sorry,
Brian,
Brendan.
Brian.
People,
Right,
they got to
no,
toughen up.
let's go back. No, that's a statement. I'm talking about a 12-year-old or an 8-year-old. No. Well, when you say toughen up, they may have come from a single parent household on the poverty line. What do you mean by toughen up?
Well, actually, I grew up in a very similar house that you just mentioned. What I'm saying is, if you're going to school and you're learning about whether it's the mathematics world, the world, whatever, one of the most important things is knowing your country. And I'm sure that Cliff agrees that, that one of the things you should know about the U.S. Everybody loves to quote the Constitution, everything. You want to know everything American, and that's great. As far as Canada goes, right now we're having a problem where there are atrocities against the almost said it again, First Nations. I got to get used to that. Or if you want to say American Indians, there were atrocities committed against them that I had absolutely no idea even existed until the last several years ago, like how bad they really were. And instead of trying to sweep it under the rug, now we're creating a National Awareness Day, and everybody seems to be more on board of we need to learn about this, we need to be aware of it, and it's not to make children feel guilty. I don't think a child would feel guilty. A child just needs to know country isn't perfect. We've done good things, we've done bad things too.
But everybody Brian, can I switch that around for a second? Now, I'm not saying we're not trying to convince each other. It's just I can see why this debate is happening in countries, because I'll spin it round again, right? A lot of people in the 90s, I mean, we hark back to the 90s when a lot of our countries are quite colorblind, and it seemed to be slightly more tolerant. It's gone a little bit very aware of everything on adverts and everything. It's gone a very, unconscious bias training, the whole blooming lot. Everybody's very aware of race suddenly. In the 90s, we were told color blindness was a good thing. Now, you could argue that some of this critical race theory, raising awareness of some terrible national blemishes 120 years ago, here, then, everywhere, to the younger generation who aren't aware because it's not happening now. Why do they need to have that? Because they would be colorblind. They would be ethnically blind. They would just get on with being a 9-year-old and with 9-year-old issues now. Why do they need to know about national blemishes that have been roughly erased?
Well,
I can understand your viewpoint on that, but the fact is that there are always going to be people who will try to blame somebody else for their troubles. They will, and that basically we're talking racism. And the only way to prevent that is to keep reminding people about what that led to, be it the Holocaust, slavery in America, what's happened here in Canada. We have to remember what these things are. Not just the big
agree
ones.
with what he's saying too. Is the CRT actually goes beyond just not teaching about slavery. It's not we're teaching about slavery, but when CRT, one of the edicts is to also say that the Constitution is invalid because for so long it didn't even apply to African Americans brought here for the slave trade or indigenous people or whatever. That to me is what's harmful. What's what you're teaching is the horror of the things that were done to these populations. But then that, through time, we've realized that we've undone it. We've fixed the Constitution. We've done things to accommodate and bring people into the nation as fellow Americans, and not as I'm not looking down the street at a neighbor and thinking of him as a freed slave anymore. I'm just thinking of him as my neighbor, right? CRT wants to really dissect and tear down even those positive paradigms of looking at the negative points of history.
I mean, I'm going to try bring in a few of the thread and then Jeremy, just so we've kind of got the balance here, because people are saying very different things. And again, there's so much nuance and complexity to this, and we're trying to deal with it properly. I was part of I'm an English teacher. I've also taught history. In year 9 in Britain, they are taught about the slave trade for many months, and I approve of that. That's not the issue, but that's not critical race theory. That's called history. My issue with this critical race theory understanding I have is that that's an imposition from a different area. You teach history, because history is undeniable. It happened. But the critical race theory is there's actually more that has to be put into the curriculum on top of discussing the slave trade, on top of this. And in the end, what we're finding, Jeremy, I think, is people on the concern side are saying, but it's not just mentioning the slave trade and teaching it and then doing this and then doing that and trying to make decent citizens in schools. What we're also doing is we're actually saying, in this case, Britain's not done much good. I mean, it's overbalanced the other way. So in the end, that's why I said shaming, Brian, because it seems to me that it's switched so much the other way that actually these little kids are hearing that their country's pretty crap and they've done a lot of bad, and they don't hear much positivity. It's kind of gone too far the other way. And these are only bloody kids, for Christ's sake. So, Jeremy, what's your thought on this?
Well, I mean, the best way to learn about history and countries falling down at that particular time is to go to some of these places like Berlin, and to physically go there, to see the bunker that was, to see the Jewish monument that is there now, etc. And that's pretty moving. It's very moving. And to actually walk down the streets of, say, Berlin and look at the pictures of the fighting as it was back in the late 40s, and just picture it just around you, how it is now, and what it must have been like, where you have a country that fell down badly, but not just once, but twice. The First World War and the Second World War. But going back to learning, I think you do need to learn about slavery, but you should not feel guilty about it. Like when we learn about the British Empire and what the British Empire did, etc., etc., we shouldn't feel guilty about it, because that's history. That's fact, and it's history, and it's in the past. We move on from that, but we have to learn about it.
Right.
But
if a child was to have any conflicting feelings because upon learning of something like this, that's something maybe either they can have a discussion with, if not the teacher, with their parents, and the parents can they're their parents. They should say, yes, you know what, this did happen, but we've come a long way since then. I don't think children are given enough credit as to how resilient they can actually be.
I'm ahead of you for 30 years, so I can speak from great experience. I'm not saying they're not resilient. They are very resilient kids. What I'm saying is the diet that's been fed to them is not balanced.
Yeah, I think it's almost an evaluation of the historical content that is included in the CRT thinking process. Yeah. And I don't want the history evaluated, but if you're adding trying to add context to the history, just teach more history. If you're trying, because we go through an entire discussion about why we're not fair to the African American population through critical race theory, and we still got Native Americans living on reservations. Nobody's talking about them at all.
The trouble with this,
I come from a sort of an educational background where I went into anthropology, and just now we've discovered people were here 10,000 years before when we thought they were. There's such a massive amount of history that we could be teaching, and we're arguing about the semantics of how to teach it. You teach the bad stuff. You got to teach the bad stuff.
Yeah.
Most of history is bad, unfortunately.
And
somebody was conquering somebody.
I'll just come in here because obviously we're discussing politics, and Rob Taylor is saying it's depressing to see Doctor Who fans in full support of Trump. Jeremy, are you in full support of Trump? Is that what you said?
I think
I didn't.
I'm not in full support of Trump because a lot of some of the stuff he says is a bit kind of way out.
We're discussing some of the policies, aren't we, and how they affect each of our countries.
I will say this. I'll say, well, what if I am? Why does that bother you? Because I don't see the context at all.
Although, as an English teacher, the statement says full support, so the adjective "full's" doing a lot of work there. What I see
is he's being more colloquial. But
well, yeah. I'll always challenge people's English if they want to get picky.
What I'm looking forward to is Donald Trump giving Keir Starmer a hard time. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Next week, Rob Taylor, we might be doing UK politics or Australian politics. It's relevant today to mention, some of the policies that have been raised by Trump. Some of them we've mentioned hyperbole. Brian quite rightly has said some of the comments have been with bad taste and gone too far. Which
way beyond. I personally despise.
Right. Well, that's clear. And then we've said the spirit. We've said the spirit underneath that sometimes carries more weight of people. And those people aren't racist, and those people aren't thick, and those people aren't stupid. They're people concerned about where they live, and they're people concerned about their kids' education, and their kids just concerned about their life. I think the CRT thing is interesting in another way, though, isn't it, folks? Because if education gets slightly skewed to the race debate, which there are issues unresolved in each country, there's also issues to do with class, issues to do with poverty that just seem to stay. And I think there's a lot of concern amongst a lot of people in most of these countries as well, saying we seem to always elevate that argument and that argument and that argument, but nobody's arguing the toss about the poor working class kids who continue to be working class, and nobody advocates for them. There's the trend in politics of what we should discuss for the next 10 years. And then there's certain people who are just always ignored. And I find that fascinating when it comes to politicians making their priorities.
Well, that's what happened during the last Trump administration. It was basically the rich got richer.
Unfortunately,
it happens in the Biden administration as well.
Yeah, and it happens in the capitalist systems, unfortunately.
It's over here as well in the UK.
Yes, bosses are now. Yeah, I think I saw research that says bosses now of CEOs and top managers were earning about 130 times the average wage of anyone who works for them, and that used to be a lot less. Well, we see.
Well, all I can say is this: if you've got the Democrats saying that they want to start taxing the rich just like everybody else gets taxed. Because as we all know, the more money you make, the more taxes you pay. That's just how it goes. You go into the higher bracket. But in the States, depending how rich you are, suddenly you don't have to pay them anymore, or it's so ridiculously small. It doesn't matter the amount of money that they could actually pull in to address problems from within the country. Like you're saying, if you're strapped for cash because we're having problems economically, there's too many immigrants coming in, there's too many this and that. So you've got the money to deal with a lot of these issues simply because people who should be paying taxes are paying them just like everybody else, but they get a get out of jail free card because they're rich. And that's there was that famous line, you guys just all got a lot richer tonight.
That's it. Go on, Jeremy.
But the Democrats were proposing they do this, and they don't want that.
The problem at the moment is that countries like America and Great Britain are not paying. We're not paying enough tax because the governments are big spenders, so they're spending more than their income.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more of a question of spending than the taxation.
Yeah.
I feel
And
plenty
that,
taxed.
well, yeah. I mean, nobody wants to pay
Yeah.
more taxes. I don't want to pay more taxes. But if you want better,
Yeah. Oh, I moved into Quebec actually 5 years
but
ago from
yeah,
Ontario, and it's drastic the taxes that you have
yeah,
to pay
Yeah.
here compared to just living in the
yeah.
rest of
But the
Canada.
thing
Now,
is,
It's
now,
double.
sorry,
More than
Jeremy, just
double.
for a second, because the thread. I'm trying to bring the thread. The thread are part of us, aren't they? The dormant assassin's been on for a little while now, and I'm fascinated by what you're saying. I don't know if you're arguing with somebody else in the thread, but dormant assassin. Let's just clarify a few things, just in case it's us. Not saying you have to be any political inclination, but how can anyone watch the TV show Doctor Who and be pro-fascist, pro-Trump, or pro-racist, or pro-rapist? And again, I will clarify that nobody on our panel has argued for any of those things. So I assume, I don't want, I will go for clarity. I think I've made a case that I'd like Britain to have a border, an immigration policy that's recognizable, an education policy that makes decent citizens of the kids and gives them weapons to earn money and have a nice life and have confidence. As an educationist of 30 years, one of the most important things to give kids is confidence and not run them down. You big them up, you let them fly. And so that's what I've been arguing, Dormant Assassin, but I can speak for the panel, can't I? Nobody on this panel has argued for any of those things you've listed there, just for clarification. And we all will like Doctor Who too. Okay.
I think you can be of any political persuasion and watch Doctor Who quite confidently
Well,
because it was written by people who had different forms, views of politics, the
yeah,
writers and
Malcolm Hulke.
producers and directors. Yeah.
Malcolm Hulke, I loved. Communist, apparently. Who cares? RTD can't stand the Tories. RTD's allowed a dormant assassin. RTD, Russell Davies, is allowed a political opinion. He never shuts up. It's fun, and he runs Doctor Who. Isn't it funny? He does Doctor Who. He's a Doctor Who fan, and he's mad on politics. But I'm not allowed to be political. Oh, that's not fair.
Well, there's also a conflation there that if you're pro-Trump, you're pro-rapist. I don't really even understand the connotation of it.
I don't know where that came from at all.
And
That
I want to be
any
fair to
sense at all.
Dormant Assassin, and please come back to us if we get it right.
Oh, okay. Now I know. Now I know where it's coming from. Okay. It's because of the E. Jean Carroll case.
Okay. You see, I know there's so many different contexts. Now I'll show you this just as we're discussing. It is interesting. Maybe Donald Trump is picking up on something from the citizens who are concerned. Now, notice what I'm saying now. That doesn't mean I'm pro-Trump. I'm just saying he's got ears and he's heard things. If you look at here, these are American newspapers and what they report in the last decade. And you will see that all the newspapers, whether it's about racism or racists, sexism or sexists, transphobes or transphobia, homophobes, homophobic, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, look at the peaks in the last 10 years. Now, either all our countries have become absolutely rabid, nasty, divided places, or the media is just maybe more aware. Is this where DEI, I'm being clumsy with my argument, but go with me for a second. Is this where DEI and other things are coming in, and unconscious bias training, that everybody's much more aware, therefore even journalists report it more when maybe it hasn't increased? That's just me making a statement. And there's, for example, the newspapers on racism, and you can see the massive increase since, gosh, from about 2012, how racist America's become, apparently. And yet in that survey, sorry,
I was just going to say they're no longer afraid to hide it, or afraid to reveal it. Sorry.
Well, there are two different ways of looking at it. People reporting things more or talking about it more means they're just more aware. It doesn't necessarily mean, because these are just terms in the newspaper. It's not saying there's racist cases, transphobic cases, homophobic cases. It's just the word. And obviously, as a linguist, I'm aware that awarenesses and fads come and go. You know, the word gay changes its meaning over time.
Well, you're not really happy. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I'm no longer happy. I'm no longer
Something else
happy.
entirely?
I mean, I should use the word queer. I can't stand the adjective queer. I hate it because in my childhood, it was a slur and it was a danger to me.
Yes.
And so I really resent, even now, some of the people who apparently are part of my community who are using words I cannot stand. And I almost feel as though they don't understand them, but they will say they've taken ownership of it. But I still find it a slur. However, I don't have a say.
That I think speaks to what this is, in my opinion, is just media using the words.
Yeah.
They know it's going to get clicks. They know it's going to get, like, where did social media come into this? About 2005.
Yep.
So we're looking at a preponderance of using inflammatory words to get clicks, to get audience, to get everything, and it's right at about that juncture. It's not that racism went up or Islamophobia went up. It's just that it sells, and the media knows that they can bifurcate. In this case, at least in the United States, bifurcate, split us into two. You choose which side you're on, and you're either with us or you're against us.
So this.
Islamophobia has gone up here.
Well, I think
undeniable.
9/11 gave us some warrant to be cautious, but I don't think it's Islamophobia. That means that I don't like anybody who is of the Islamic faith.
That's
you. That's flipping the terminology to mean something and ascribe to people something that.
For example, Brian, you know, I was accused of being far right yesterday, right? Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
And so if we did a bar graph or a line graph, we could say that the use of the word far right has increased in the last couple of years, but that doesn't mean it's on the increase. It just means people are pointing fingers more and actually not being accurate. Now, Islamophobia is interesting in Britain because Islamophobia, the government are about to come up with a policy and they are trying to define it. And the way it's defined, it's not Islamophobia. It's quite a wide definition, and it would entrap an awful lot of thoughts. And so even the term Islamophobia in that case, out of those 6 choices there, different countries. Oh, do you know what? The English language is dangerous, isn't it? Because different countries and politicians entrap their citizens in different ways. Anyway, it's fascinating.
Not here.
That's it.
Not here. No, not in America.
So far, I mean, that's the upside of the First Amendment is I can't say or do something that would directly endanger somebody. Fire in a public theater kind of, rhetoric or actually wish harm upon somebody and say that directly. But in theory, you can say whatever you want. And as a matter of fact, I would rather people say awful stuff in the open where I know they're saying it, because then I know that's the guy I got to watch out for.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There's a tendency to want to know. Well, we don't want it hidden. You want to know it seen and visible.
Protect all speech, so that even the awful speech is allowed, so that the wildest idea. I mean, there's probably some crazy ideas, like the Earth is round, which were heretical at some point. But if you say you can't say it, then even freewheeling stuff like that.
And look, and Dormant Assassin, thanks for sticking with us.
You can't say without any authority, I guess, would be a better way to put it. I mean, let's face it, anybody who thinks the world is flat is an idiot. and I stand by that statement.
I will stick to follow the science on that one.
Yeah.
What, you mean it's not round?
And the moon is made of spiders. If we're doing Doctor Who, hello, what was it? That's spider's eggs or something. Oh, God.
I thought it was cheese.
It was nonsense. Now, Dormant Assassin has stuck with us, and thank you, Dormant Assassin, because I'll give and take, and I'd like to understand. So thank you for sticking with us, because I think that shows you're tolerant as well as the rest of us here. I was called anti-Semitic and Islamophobic because I questioned why would the first thing you do to your male child is to mutilate their genitals as a baby. Right. So
that's a good one.
Well, It's
circumcision or something else.
It must be circumcision.
No, he's referring to circumcision. And I said that's a good one because I was raised Roman Catholic. Didn't stop my parents. Sorry, everybody. Now we all know.
It didn't stop my parents either. But it's interesting, isn't it, Dom and Assassin? Anti-Semitic, Islamophobic. This is my very point. I was making some case yesterday, as I've said, about Doctor Who, and the finger gets pointed and somebody says far right, and you think, dear me. Argue with me, yeah. But what? And anti-Semitic, because you make a point, and some people do say that. I mean, we go on about female genital mutilation, don't we? And that is the term.
Yeah.
Female genital mutilation. That is the term. So why is this not? I understand it. I'm just putting the question out there. So all you've done, Dom and Assassin, is make that point. I think this labeling is the problem. It kills discussion and it kills debate when actually within the question, and however it's couched, it's a fair question, I know, although I don't see it as muted. How dare you? But I know. I just wish we'd stop all the labels. The labels doesn't further debate; it kills it.
I thought it was quite interesting
because you have to have the debate with those words flying around. Somebody involved in it is going to have to say it's going to have to accept their team as the Islamophobic team, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a certain segment of a culture that wants to suicide bomb people. That's happened in many cultures, but right now it's the ISIS folks. I have concerns about that, not people of Islamic faith, and I think that distinction is lost. I think if you're talking about, if we swing it back around, talking about a Trump domestic policy, you really or a cultural policy, you that's where his honing in on DEI and those kind of things, where we don't want to talk about the word race anymore. Let's just talk about if ethnicity is a factor, and you want to come here and be part of your ethnic group and be in that community. I don't know where I'm really going with this, but I think we're using inflammatory words that cause people to have to choose a side.
This is what's happened with
being part of the whole.
But this is what's happened with the phrase DEI. DEI has become pejorative too, hasn't it? DEI may have had good intentions, but DEI as policies, and let's face it, let's be honest what they mean. They mean diversity of workforce. They mean inclusion of workforce. And they mean equity of workforce. And unfortunately, what's happened is, it may be in the execution of it in various places, or over execution of it, or zealous execution of it, it's got people's backs up in various places. And so now, from my viewpoint, what Donald Trump is jumping on is DEI is a pejorative phrase now. And so some people see it as very negative, and which is a shame, because that means you're going all the way back. But it's got a bad press to some people, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's got a lot of bad press. DEI at the moment, certainly in this country at the moment. Yeah.
I mean, Brian, go on. Sorry, go on. Keep going, Cliff, and then I'll bring Brian.
Well, I don't want to. I've kind of talked a lot still, but I recently gone back to school. I'm taking online classes to get another degree, so I can go on and be a teacher. And I was required to take.
Reading.
I was required to take at least 3 courses on diversity and equity and inclusion, and it struck me as a very strange, silly, circular pattern where we're supposed to acknowledge somebody's differentness, express it, put that forward whenever we deal with them, and yet by the same token, we're not supposed to. It would be like me only referring to Brendan as the gay person on the show. I mean, eventually that gets friggin' old, and it's also not his only quality. It's also
a very
not
good
his driving
one.
quality. You know what I mean? So why are we focusing? It's a good quality.
I find it ironic. You got, when some people say in the chat,
You win the internet today,
apparently,
Brendan.
I'm a far right Doctor Who gay nutter. But that's where I am.
But you see, my point is that the entirety of DEI is pointing out qualities of people that put them into categories so that we can continue to put them into categories. Isn't that what we've striven in Western culture to move away from for, like, I don't know, a century?
Well, the essence of the word inclusion is not to divide.
It is, but they're choosing that word specifically so that if we didn't have, there's nobody of African descent on this show, so we need to kick Brian and get somebody on here.
Well, I was aware
that kind of approach is what's weird to me.
I mean, I was aware because we were going to do the show on Tuesday. It is my fault. I double booked with my football and all the rest of it. And Michelle was going to come on. Michelle, American, we know her from the Doctor Who show. She's also a Doctor Who fan and also happens to be political. She's skilled. But because of that, I couldn't get her today. So we may have had a female on the panel. Does that matter? I was aware of it, though, when the four of us turned up, because normally I have Rachel on or somebody. But yes, I know. How progressive is it even to even go there and have a female representation, then have a whatever else representation? Does it actually further the debate? Not necessarily. It might open up certain avenues or viewpoints that, but I know it, as with everything, it's got a good intention, but if it's in the execution and application where the problem can lie. And all you need is zealots in anything. Zealotry is dangerous, as you know. And Brian, you've mentioned LGBTQ. You're better at representing the community than me.
No,
but the issue is, and somebody in the thread, I can't remember if it was Heather or somebody, was saying that when they go and visit their kids' school and there's rainbow flags everywhere, it really gets their back up, so to speak, because it's like just overdone. Everything's overdone. Yes, children should be tolerant. Yes. But certain things look overdone in certain places. The trouble is, there's never, like education policy, not every school's the same. You know that. Some teachers are absolutely crazed on something. That's their hobby horse. That's their thing. Same with the NHS and certain hospitals. Same with certain organizations. And because these people are trying to prove their kind of status, they might push something just too far. And then it unfortunately causes kickback. So you've quite rightly talked about trans people tonight, and for example, Trump has mentioned that there's only two genders. I am aware that.
I know now.
Yeah.
Is Trump anti-gay?
I did not know that he said that. That was today?
Yes. Yeah. It was in his speech.
Yeah, I honestly, after what we've been through for the past 8 years, I steered clear of everything today, which may have been counterproductive to the show.
No, but on the point,
if anything, it shows what's been going on has affected a lot of the population. Where it's just like I need a rest. I cannot take this anymore.
But on the question, I mean, I like I said, I always play the ball, not the man, half the time. But the issue is, when in a way, Trump said something, but there's a whole industry behind it, and there's people behind it, and there's millions behind it. So I'm looking at the point, which is that an issue that a politician is saying there's only two genders? Because I'm well aware from my Doctor Who channel that there's an awful lot of people who were angry watching the Star Beast and various shows saying, please, this is when the grooming words, as you said, Brian, sometimes comes up. That an agenda's been a bit too aggressively pushed. And if you put a 70s comedy show on in Britain, and I'm sure in your country as well, there's a trigger warning in the corner that these attitudes are outdated and disgusting and horrible. But
you were to put All the Family on TV now.
But what some parents think also is certain issues, right, are in certain narratives, and there's no trigger warning in the corner.
like Rogue.
Could you maybe elaborate on that?
Well, I'm linking it to what Trump said on behalf of other millions as well, and you know, I'm getting behind it, which is he said there's two genders.
I remember a Star Trek episode, Next Generation episode. Like everything I'm going to recollect here goes back to some kind of science fiction, so you'll have to forgive me, of course, right? But they were an androgynous race, and one was forced to have to choose to be male or female at a certain point, and fell in love with Riker and all that kind of stuff. And I think more was done for the acceptance of the non-binary type of gender identifying person in that episode 30 years ago now, I guess, than most media. Okay, so I was watching that going, oh, that's a different perspective. I kind of dig that. What seems odd to me is the inclusion in the Doctor Who episode had no bearing on the plot. It had nothing to do with anything other than wedging it in. And that's not really creativity. It's not really trying to. It's forcing the acceptance on people. And I don't think science fiction works best that way. I don't think storytelling works best that way. But again, it goes to make a choice. I dare you, or go touch grass.
Yeah, like Cliff and I have never met before, and I've said, I'm very liberal, but this will surprise a lot of people when I say I don't want a gay doctor. I don't want all of this messaging going on in Doctor Who all the time. And then people could jump at me and say, well, you're a racist, or you're a transphobe, or etc. And it's like, no, you don't understand. It's like, it's just like, this is not what the show is. And if you're trying to change it into this, I don't like the show anymore. And it's not because of that. It's like, I've watched through Queer as Folk. I've watched
but also politically. Oh, sorry. But also politically, is it controversial for any politician and also any person to say there's only two genders?
I would say yes, because until recently, I didn't quite understand. And it's almost like quantum mechanics of sex. I had to have my ex explain to me there are two sexes, but there are more than two genders, and it's very difficult to get a grasp on. Actually, I had a friend of mine. I had one family member, one friend of mine, actually say that they were non-binary. Or one of them saying they were transgender, and I said, I don't get it. I don't understand this. And the short answer was, dude, you can't understand it unless you're one of us. You will never.
Can I just for a second, because I'm trying to. Can I push back on one thing? Because I'm concerned about language too, and one of the things I'm concerned about is we didn't want gay conversion therapy, right? Right.
Oh, absolutely.
However, in this kind of template of choice that's available nowadays, apparently, you can be beyond gay. You can be all these other things as well. I'm not going to be flippant about it, but there's more than just saying you're male, female, gay, or straight. There's a whole diet there. Now, that opens up the option, like trans can be an option, as you know, for parents who are homophobic to be happier to say their child is just needing to transition. And that has become a problem in some cases, not all. It's just one of those problem areas where if a message is sold too young, remember, I was in a school where some of the kids at aged 11 were asked to declare whether they were binary, non-binary, this, that, and the other. The kids, I was still trying to teach them to be literate. And I didn't know I was gay at 11. So I am perplexed that some kids will be autistic and various other things out there where certain things put to them in a certain definition might twist their understanding. And I think that's in a way, and I'm trying to do this ably, hopefully I am, that's where I think some people with a TV program and with certain programs in schools are saying, I'd rather talk about this than the school do it or RTD do it in a script. You know?
I mean, the big question is Donald Trump anti-gay? Because I'm trying to work it out because he was dancing with the village people on stage, and I
He
thought
was.
the irony of
But
that is fantastic. You know what I mean?
the last campaign, one of his main campaign managers was a right wing guy
Yeah.
who happened to be homosexual as well.
So I don't know.
My question always becomes, if there's two genders. Is there two genders? Are there more? If that's the case, what does non-binary mean?
Yeah, but you're either
What are you
born male or
transing to?
female.
It's what people don't understand and may be afraid of. That's what I think is what we were talking about Trump earlier.
I would disagree that it's just a changing of terminologies, and that you can be anywhere along the spectrum you want and call it whatever you want, however you want to present yourself. I don't care. I don't care whether you are a man dressing like a woman or you're a woman who wants to become more masculine, but there's still only two to start with, and there's different ways to present within that. That would be my theory. I think probably the basis on which
I've tried to cover it without, like when you do YouTube channels, you don't want it to be the big debate all night. But the way I try and mention it is, it seems to me when you talk to many people out there that it's an unsettled issue. There's no agreement. Therefore, that's when I think it's dangerous to be taught by a script writer in a kids' TV program, done clumsily. That's when a zealot teacher might over-egg something. Remember, parents always had the right to take their kids out of sex education because they'd do it themselves. They always had that right to give permission or take it away. But it seems now that the way some schools are operating, the parents have no choice at all. And some things have been said that they don't personally agree with.
I had to sit down with my 10-year-old child and talk about how females get impregnated, because they were leading him up to a health class thing in school. And it was very, very uncomfortable. And I felt probably a little early for him to be getting to that kind of biological sense of things. I mean, he knew that.
How old?
It was a couple of years ago. He was 10 at the time.
Okay, if I can make a comment, this was actually what's going quite relevant to what's going on I can't remember which state. If you can remember, please tell me. They are now trying to ban access to pornographic websites. So you basically have to be able to prove that you're 18 years of age, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now,
did that here.
When I read that article and I gave it a good thought, I had to think, when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, I can remember, stumbling across a magazine in the forest or finding your dad's stack of old Playboys from the 70s in the garage. The stuff that is on the internet today.
Yeah.
Some of it is just revolting. And a kid can watch it with just the click of a mouse, and that does need to stop.
And it's true, because what I've seen in teaching, and most kids are well balanced. Again, we've got to put the health warning in there, but there are kids who are overexposed to this, and if it was a little lad, the way they see a girl, it's too over objective and too sexualized. And I've actually talked to teenagers where they actually think that the version of when it gets a little bit more steamy in their dating is just pornographic. It's not normal. It's not dating. It's not cuddling. It's not. Their understanding's been distorted. And yes, that has to be dealt with at a governmental level. And you could call that censorship, but I think it's called safeguarding kids. I mean,
there's
now
there's an age limit for when we allow our kids to drink at a bar or pub, when to drive.
Now, Dormant Assassin here says, to be honest, I'd rather have rainbow flags than when I was at school. It was not allowed to be mentioned, Section 28. I remember it well, Dormant Assassin. I was at school with Section 28. That was Mrs. Thatcher, wasn't it? She didn't want homosexuality to be...
No, I'm not.
She didn't want homosexuality to be promoted.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, I will carry on though, Brian, because obviously just to let carry on with the debate.
I think you need the Americans to take over the Canadian internet.
One of the interesting things in his domestic policy, by the way, was this about TikTok. No. How dare I? I want to go on this one, if you don't mind, lads. This one, I find it fascinating. Being a Brit, I was fascinated by this because we're getting heavily involved in the net zero debate, and there's people arguing the toss about it. Donald Trump, here is a real tweet from him. Windmills are an economic and environmental disaster. I don't want even one built during my administration. The thousands of dead and broken ones should be ripped down as soon as possible. Most expensive energy, only work with massive government subsidies, which we no longer pay. Now, that is the new president of America for the next 4 years. That's a policy he is discussing. I'm intrigued as a British person because we are pretty much pouring a lot of our net zero money into windmills.
Yep.
And what concerns me, Jeremy, I'm going to come to you first. What concerns me about when I see a bigger country take a turn like this to basically protect themselves and economically probably do well. You know, what did he say today? You know, drill, baby, drill.
Yes,
he's going to get more oil out the ground. Britain has decided not to go and get any more oil out the ground. So we are going to be this silly carbon neutral country who gets all its carbon from abroad. So actually, we're not carbon neutral. We're just taking it from somewhere else, but we're paying extra.
Well, we can never be carbon neutral as long as we're using energy. But I think obviously sees there's a gap in the market because obviously Russia's been restricted to the oil that it can sell. So he's going to move into that market.
But it's also that's a capitalist talking. And what I want to say to all the lads here in the thread is, wherever you stand on net zero, and good, our friend Simon Anthony, who's a green politician, will certainly argue the toss with me. But on the net zero debate, okay, you can believe that the planet's in danger and everything else. I'm not arguing about that. What I'm saying is, if some countries want to run to be in net zero ahead of others, economically, that could be suicidal. And if I'm a British person, I don't want to be the suicidal economy. And when I see America decide that they're going to drill, they're going to frack, they're going to get rid of windmills, they're going to do all these things and probably make a lot of money and do well and grow as an economy, I'm looking at Britain going, I'm worried that we are going to just go, well, aren't we the great, decent people, but economically naive? Jeremy, where do you stand on this?
Well, the alternative source of energy goes back to the 1970s, when, of course, oil was cheap. So they explored the idea of solar, wind, wave, etc., but then they poo-pooed it because oil was cheap and petrol companies, etc., were obviously wanting to make a lot of money. So, but now, of course, years and years later on, they've explored into solar, wind, and wave energy as an alternative to nuclear and, of course, oil. But I mean, as I said, I think that you should never put all your eggs in one basket, is the old phrase.
No.
And so you should, because we need a lot of energy, we consume a lot of energy with phones, electric cars, etc., that you've got to have different sources of how you get that energy. Otherwise, you're going to be reliant on Russian oil, which is what we don't want to be reliant on one particular country. But obviously, he does see there's a gap in the market. So he says, drill for oil. We sell it abroad, we make a lot of money, and that's how we'll get the economy back on its feet again.
And it doesn't make any sense to me, Cliff, that Britain we're going to stop drilling for oil in the North Sea. So we buy our oil and gas instead from Norway, who makes profit from it.
Yeah.
Why are we doing that? I'm not going against, remember this debate, I am not saying I'm against climate danger or anything. What I'm saying is I don't want to be economically stupid. And if we want to be the first, we want the gold medal at net zero, while every other country gets richer. And that's worries me, Cliff.
Well, one of the things, what was was it NAFTA, the pipeline from Canada down to Texas? It got shut down during the Biden administration. Am I using the right acronym? It's essentially because there's a huge amount of terrible oil reserves there. Canada is mostly frozen. I don't know if Brian knows that or not, but they don't have a lot of the refining, and we excel at it, especially in Texas. So the idea was to get a lot of that terrible oil out of the ground, refine it the best we could, and sell it. Now, like you said, eggs in the basket and that kind of thing. I think the general approach is not whether we're being green or we have oil involved. We can't concentrate all of it, switch everything out just for these supposed quote unquote green energies. Solar does not produce enough. Half the day is night, and it's not always windy enough. So you're not offsetting the amount of energy output that you would with oil and gas. You're just not. Natural gas is being the predominant way we're cooled here. We're dropping way down to maybe 34 degrees here in Texas tonight. So the only way to keep warm is that fossil fuel stuff. Now, that's not to say that you should count out. I've always even advocated we have 3 nuclear plants here in Texas as part of our grid. Texas is its own power grid.
I didn't know you had nuclear in Texas.
We have 3 plants. If we built a 4th one, we would need none of the wind and solar.
I'm jealous.
You'd be out in the middle of the desert and nobody could even get near it.
I'm jealous. We used to be leaders in nuclear energy, and we've absolutely ballsed it and dropped the thing.
But the problem with nuclear, of course, you got issues like Chernobyl and Fukushima.
Yeah,
and nuclear pollution. And
I know, but we're making those decisions based on 2-3 instances, right?
Yeah.
In 50 years. It's really probably safer than we think. And I don't want to misquote Doctor Who with the 4th Doctor being Tom Baker's birthday today as well.
Yeah, happy birthday,
91st birthday.
Yes, 91.
91, yeah, brilliant.
The sooner we figure out the excitation of hydrogen, the better.
Yeah,
and hydrogen energy, the offset in terms of exhaust is H2O. That's it.
And eventually
this move to drill baby drill is about shifting the economic balance, and this is where I'll probably bring Brian on board. Is that it's just to make some other different people rich, other than the people
and that's what concerns me. And the other thing is, we started this debate ages ago when we were talking about when immigration was one of the early ones we talked about, and we talked about economy coping. And of course, I made the economic argument that you don't want to be first to net zero in an economic arms race. Now, Simon Anthony, the contrarian on our channel, Brendan, that old economic argument is no longer true, fortunately. It isn't now. Elon is making even less expensive. Are you talking about what I'm saying, Simon Anthony, is just when you have COP every year, when we have the big COP events, I noticed Keir Starmer went this year to Azerbaijan, but most of the Western leaders didn't go. And the Azerbaijan prime minister or president announced how big in oil they were at a COP thing. And I just thought, we've just cancelled our oil licenses, and yet we've just gone to COP to virtue signal to an oil-rich nation. Is it any surprise that the Middle Eastern countries like Qatar, Saudi Arabia are doing all the football World Cups, are doing some of the big events, that their airports are enormous, that they are sucking in lots of investment, and they're oil-rich, and we're piously going down some net zero agenda and getting poorer? Is there something I'm missing here?
Yeah.
Well, one thing that it's not even covered in terms of whether you're talking about drill baby drill is and Elon has made electric cars much more in the forefront. I mean, Teslas are weird looking cars. They're just weird looking cars, but the Cybertruck, in other words. But the batteries, the materials we need, are pretty much through China. And so drill baby drill is another way to alleviate that, extend our reliance on petroleum and natural gas with vehicles, with cars. I mean, we're also, the United States is vast. I was explaining, I posted on Facebook the other day my dismay that we buy 18 eggs at a time, a dozen and a half for the kids eating eggs for breakfast in the morning, and a dozen and a half eggs is almost $8 now.
Oh yes, when I was over in America, I couldn't believe baked beans cost so much. Brian, are you back with us?
Yeah, I think he's frozen in time.
Brian, are you with us?
He keeps coming in and out, I believe.
Let me just go. Let me just take him.
But that kind of transit of goods across our country is you're not going to have an electric 18-wheel vehicle. It just can't. Those kind of giant trucks have to have petrol.
But I mean, also nobody talks about conservation of energy, which I think is also quite important as well.
Exactly.
Having lights on in big cities, like let's say New York.
Well, I've done a lot of digging even into the electric car thing, the science behind it, and most of the problem with electric car, like in this now colder weather, they run less efficiently. It uses up the electricity faster.
Yeah.
Most of it's carrying the battery of the car because the batteries have to be so huge and heavy. So when you start loading them up with all your family and luggage to go on a holiday, you're not getting nearly the efficiency out of this supposedly clean energy. And then you have to rely on the power grid, which is fossil fuels, to recharge you.
But I mean, eventually the technology will get better and better as the years go on, and they'll solve a lot of the issues of those things like batteries.
I hope it will, but it's going to have to make people a lot of money to do it. That's also the argument of now we're just shifting from people making millions off of green energy to people making millions off of oil. Unless a hydrogen tank is going to make people millions of dollars, they're not going to shift to it. It's going to be too cheap and too easy to make, and we're not going to do that.
No.
So from today's inauguration and the announcements, I'm asking a thread and my two remaining panelists, is there anything we haven't discussed? Is there an area where you're going, gosh, we haven't mentioned that? That's so important.
Well, we haven't discussed the relationship between America and the UK government.
Non-existent.
Because that's going to be very interesting.
Well, this mythical free trade deal.
Special relationship.
But special relationship. There was a Commons report years ago, one of the Commons committees, and they said that every British Prime Minister should stop acting like a poodle and should stop using that phrase. I, for one, agree. It's pathetic, it's fawning, it's brown-nosing, and it's patronising, and it's stupid. We don't have a special relationship. We just finished paying our war debt in the 2000s. America charged us for going to war with Germany. I'm sorry, where's the special relationship again? Please explain. They gladly saw the dissembling of our British Empire while they built their own. I mean, hello, excuse me, special relationship. The British need to grow up and stop saying we need a special relationship with America. Yes, we have kindred, cousins, we have a history, we have a bond, but let's get over it. They're a separate country to us, excuse me. And a free trade deal, there's certain things in that. Trump will have our life if we have a free, we'll have no farming left.
The special relationship goes back to Churchill, when Churchill asked the president for help in fighting in the Second World War, which they did. I mean, America could have turned around and said, no, we're not. But they had to be persuaded to come in.
There was a bit of money involved.
Well, I don't blame them. I have to say,
I don't blame them. That's not a special relationship, exactly.
No.
Remember, we had to pay a war debt as a friend of America, but the Germans didn't have to pay reparations. They had a master plan.
Because obviously destroyed the country practically. So we had to pour the money, put the
Yeah,
money in
and
to
Brit
get
and
this
Brit
nation
and
back.
Britain was all, fine and dandy. Coventry Cathedral looked wonderful, and London looked sparkling. Yeah, I know. I'm exaggerating for the sake of a fun argument, but yeah, special
Yeah.
relationship. I think we've got to stop talking like little kids in Britain. Special relationship. Get over yourselves.
Get over it.
Stop
Well,
going with a begging bowl to America. Hello, holding their
Well,
hand.
we might actually have to go
I,
to America with the begging bowl if the debt increases and the
Oh
situation
yeah,
gets worse
we need to
financially,
get our act together. I agree. Yeah.
because we won't get it from Europe, the European Union, that's for sure. Because the
no.
European Union say if you want to get back into the European Union, you pay us a
Well,
big fee to
yeah.
rejoin it.
You're welcome to more of Greece's debt. Um,
Oh yeah.
there, that was not a good position to be in. I don't envy England at all, having to decide
Hmm.
to be
Yeah, but
part
the
of a
problem,
greater union, or because that's what we did, right?
yeah, I mean,
Or to stand alone with essentially the only exports being other British people.
I mean,
You don't really have a large economy there on the island. It's um, I don't know.
I
There are benefits to both.
the history of Britain for quite a long time now, almost 80 years, is we are torn. We look across the pond and we also know Europe's next door. And the British psyche politically has been torn and it can't fully make its mind up. And as you know, we have been in the EC, we have been in the EU, and we haven't. And
well, we still are really, and on all
yeah,
intents and purposes.
we're in
We're
its
Barely.
still
orbit.
having to listen. Yeah, we're in its orbit. We're still having to listen to some of the European Union regulations and having to still abide by them. And I can't understand this because we're out. We're out of the European Union. Effectively, we should be.
We should, yeah, we've got to make Brexit. Brexit's happened apparently, but we need to make Brexit as it was meant to be. And we're going through. This is what I mean. When you do all the DEI and everything else, I just find that Britain at the moment is going through an identity crisis, and actually, it's not a good time to make any big decisions
But
about net zero, about anything, because Britain just doesn't know what it is or
yeah,
what it wants,
what
and
what we're
that's
so sorry. What we're going through is we're going through the Biden administration type of government for the next 4 years. America has broken free of that, so they've got a Trump government. I mean, as I said, and then in the next 3 4 years, it could be a very very different country parliament. It could be
And Kess,
reformed.
I saw in the comments there, Kess the drone said that I don't know if you entirely depend on the U.S. for defense, but that lends to the acquisition of
The
Greenland or the bringing of
the,
Greenland into the
the
United
whole
States
of Europe, the whole of
as
Europe
being
depends.
beneficial to that.
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
the whole of Europe depends on America's defense system, the umbrella.
I would even say that we didn't get into topics like NATO and the Ukraine and the Middle East and Israel and some of these global hotspots that are militarily part of the foreign policy,
Mm.
and billions and billions of dollars we've sent to Ukraine, and I don't even know
Mm.
what it's doing there.
But yeah, but I
You
mean,
know that's incredibly concerning to me. It's far more concerning to me
I
than
mean,
Britain
someone
is an
stranded
island. Yeah, but Britain is an island. We're not Europeans. We are
on.
British, and we have
Yeah.
been for many years.
It 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 it's an absolute fascinating. I mean, I hope everybody's enjoyed this debate. Next week there'll be another one, maybe
Very good.
British centric or
Oh yeah,
European centric. The point is, we can be flexible. And I have to say, and I'll say it again for clarity for anybody who's joined us, I don't think we've got any far right or anything on this panel, and
no,
neither in the thread. Actually, I think we've got an awful lot of decent people. The crossover is Doctor Who. I think we've got intelligent, mature people who can have an open mind and can also be strong on certain issues. And that's just as it is.
Well, I don't know about Jeremy. I'll interject just a second. I don't know about Jeremy, but Doctor Who is what taught me a lot of this.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Watching
Yeah.
Doctor Who and the conventions, the things, the writing that it challenged, the storylines that it conveyed
Mm.
were all about this even analytical thinking, but bringing people in that are not of the norm, or not treating people badly just because they're different. All these things were part of the sci-fi me growing up.
Yeah,
I was a little isolated, little weird kid, but I think it's cool that you started this format, and it's multinational, and it could go on, and
Well,
we can. It's a cool dialogue to have.
I've enjoyed it, and I think the thread has. And as I come to Jeremy, I mean, part of my plan was, when you do travel widely. So I've just been to America and Canada, and I normally go to Australia. And when you go to those countries, you go, God, they're doing the same policies as in Britain, or they're doing the opposite. And because we're very similar, you're fascinated. And when I was in Canada, I noticed certain things. I'm not going to say now, we're too far gone. In America, I noticed certain things. And I could see where Britain was, either behind or ahead, for good or for bad. And I think that's always a great debate to have, that we all spot across the pond and across other areas, we spot patterns. So we're not here necessarily to rant and rave. That wasn't the plan. We will say what we feel, because that's called honesty and authentic. But the truth is, I may never meet Cliff. I may never meet Jeremy. I may never meet Brian, and I may not meet anybody in the thread. But we can all say, but have you noticed that? But what about that? And I think that is brilliant in a debate, to just widen an understanding. No cancellation, no storming off. Hopefully I've shown, sometimes I'm saying, can you clarify that? Can you show me a bit? What do you mean by that? Because I'd rather know. I love it when people disagree with me without being rude. I like to understand. And Jeremy, I love having on the channel because you're similar. You are open. You are moderate in how we talk and everything. And Cliff, you're the same. You're a thinker, and we go through this. And Brian's the same, I have to say. And actually, people I have on my show tend to be like that. And I would similarly think people in the thread are that type. So it's been a fascinating debate. And if we do have one on Britain or Europe or the globe next week, who knows? We can have it with mutual respect, and we can ask each other questions, and we can find patterns and all the rest of it. Now, Jeremy, I was going to bring you in then. What have your thoughts been?
Yeah, it's been very good discussion. It's been a very interesting discussion on politics. I mean, there's no other programs like this even on terrestrial television where they actually have a sit-down discussion. You know what I mean? And that's what's missing the BBC. If they had a late night discussion program on anything, where they some chips and gravy. Yeah, what about me?
Yeah. It's nice. I mean, people are friendly, and look, we might even disagree, but who cares? The point is, in debate, you can come on. You sometimes see in Parliament, in every country, in Congress, you see people who are on opposite sides of politics, but they're actually friends. Yeah. And I think that's what's sometimes missing in the mainstream of things. And as you're saying, where's these TV programs where we can debate and actually all disagree?
If you had different people from different professions sat down having a meal, having a discussion, a late night discussion. Channel 4 used to do something like that.
Yes.
And a lot of it was quite interesting, but they don't do that now.
Yeah, I mean, for example, here's the last example: the Hand of Lenin. I'd love to know where you live. It's just because it gives me context. You
Brexit
say
was wonderful.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Because you're saying Brexit was a total disaster. That is allowed to be said, and I'm putting it up. I would like a debate about Brexit, because in Britain, that's all we're blooming well talk about. So, Hand of Lenin, just tell us quickly, where are you? And honestly, on a panel in future, I'd love people to come on. I slightly disagree with that, but it'd be a great debate.
I would go one step further. I'd like to dismantle the European Union, period.
So it's all about debate. I think you learn, you create understanding, and if we all were in the pub now, you shake hands and you go home. That's the point. I've absolutely, Simon Anthony. Simon Anthony, I agree. You don't agree with me on Brexit, I will have you on. I've said it here. I am a man of my word.
Well, eventually, you won't be able to have discussions like this in a British pub because somebody might get
Did
offended, and
just see
then
that. I did just see that today with the augmentation of the speech laws there, and good luck with that.
yeah, well, speech laws is another thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Might
Hand
have
of
to discuss
Lenin.
it.
If you Hand of Lenin, write to me on Gmail or on X if you want to come on. You know we'll be fair with you. I hope you do anyway. We do want a good debate.
Yeah,
Right.
let's have a Brexit
And
debate.
may I, as apparently the representative American here, say I am not representative of America. I don't feel like I speak for everyone here. There's an awful lot of us. So if there's other,
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not right wing. I can tell you that,
No.
or extreme right wing.
No,
well,
no.
and that's again putting people into pockets that
It's too
actually
hard.
don't really apply. I think we all have views that are on
Yeah.
all sides
Yeah.
of the spectrum.
I'm more middle of the road, I would
Yeah,
say.
a kaleidoscope of things. And sometimes it's fascinating. You can see somebody who's, yeah, labels are bad. Just labels are lazy because a label that says you're that and yet you're very that. It's just mad. Anthony Parkinson, you can see we could have a good debate. I say the same to you. I'm being very fair here. Please come on. It's with let's show how debate can be done. Brexit has cost you, and I saw what you said earlier because I put it up. Brexit's cost you 20,000 a year. That's to do with your business or your mortgage, I think you were saying. Look, it's a complicated argument, and you know where I'm saying I stand in simple terms, but I do need your voice shown. So please, everybody, you know I mean this, and you know I'll still be doing Doctor Who. So thank you, Cliff, and thank you, Brian, who has been on, and thank you, Jeremy. I've loved it.
Yes.
And it's a big day in America, Inauguration Day. I mean, I felt a bit of excitement just watching it because you see all the presidents there. Actually, the rotunda's not a bad setting, actually. I suppose it's unfair to the populace because they can't actually witness it as I think America would like that. That's part of their democracy. And it ends up being the elite are all in there.
But the question is, why did they have it in January?
Yeah, I know. Move your election system.
Especially
Anyway,
in Washington. I mean,
I know.
this one thing.
But every time when you see the primaries, New Hampshire and Iowa, and you think, "Oh my God, look at the weather!" There's always snow, and it's always it's always the
It
cold start to the
It
primaries.
should be like us, have a summer election, an election in June, and then the president moves straight in. That's it.
Yeah. Right, everybody, we've had a hell of a debate. I've got to have a few days thinking about my next Doctor Who channel. If I just say before we go, Fridays that was the week that was woke. And we talk about wokeness in a pejorative way and a cheeky way. It's allowed, isn't it? It's called a sense of humor. Then the detox is on Friday, the Doctor Who detox, where ironically every week I get worse and it gets more toxic. The Sunday show at 6. Come on. I'm trying to do loads, and we'll do the politics one because I have absolutely loved this. So good night, everybody. I hope Americans have had a lovely day, whatever your politics are.
Happy birthday to Tom Baker as well.
And happy 91st birthday to Tom Baker. May he have many more left. And he's still got his faculties, which is brilliant.
Be here.
Anyway, thank you. I've said thank you a few times. See you, everybody. Stick with us. Bye.